You made it here, which probably means sleep hasn't been cooperating. That's all right. Nights like this can feel long and heavy, but you're not going through it alone. Let me walk you through 5 quiet stories while the rain taps at the windows. You don't have to do anything except listen. Story 1. The upstairs neighbor who dragged furniture for hours after he went missing. I've lived in a lot of apartments, cheap ones mostly, the kind with thin walls and thinner carpets, where you learn your neighbors' schedules whether you want to or not. You hear when they wake up, when they shower, when they fight with their partners at 2 a.m. about whose turn it was to do the dishes. It's just part of city living. You learn to tune it out. But I never learned to tune out what happened in the apartment above mine. I moved into the Bellwood Arms in March, right after my lease ended at a place across town. The Bellwood was one of those old brick buildings from the 1950s, 4 stories, no elevator, radiator heat that either worked too well or not at all. My unit was on the 3rd floor, apartment 3C, a 1-bedroom with a view of the alley, and a kitchen so small you couldn't open the oven and the refrigerator at the same time. But the rent was reasonable and the location was good, so I signed the lease and hauled my stuff up 3 flights of stairs on a rainy Saturday afternoon. I met my upstairs neighbor the same day. His name was Martin Kessler, and he lived directly above me in 4C. I was struggling with a box of books on the landing when his door opened, and he stepped out, a thin man in his 60s with wire-rimmed glasses and a cardigan that looked older than I was. He had that slightly rumpled look of someone who spent too much time indoors, but his smile was genuine. "New tenant," he said. It wasn't a question. "Welcome to the Bellwood. I'm Martin." I introduced myself, shifted the box to my hip. He offered to help carry things, which I politely declined. He didn't look like he could handle much more than a lamp, but we chatted for a few minutes. He'd lived in the building for almost 20 years, he told me. Retired professor of something academic that I didn't quite catch. Kept to himself, mostly. Read a lot. Didn't sleep well. "You might hear me moving around at night," he said, almost apologetically. "I pace when I can't sleep. Old habit. I try to be quiet, but these floors..." He gestured at the worn hardwood beneath us. "They don't cooperate." I told him not to worry about it. I was a heavy sleeper. We shook hands, and he shuffled back into his apartment, and I didn't think much more about it. For the first few weeks, everything was fine. I'd hear Martin occasionally, footsteps overhead, the creak of floorboards, the muffled sound of what might have been classical music playing late at night, normal neighbor sounds. Nothing that kept me awake, nothing that bothered me. I was busy with work, busy settling in, busy with all the small tasks that come with a new apartment. Then, in early April, the furniture started. It was a Tuesday night. I remember because I'd stayed up late finishing a project, and I was finally drifting off around midnight when I heard it. A long, slow scrape directly above my bedroom. The unmistakable sound of something heavy being dragged across a wooden floor. I opened my eyes and stared at the ceiling. The sound continued, a grinding, groaning noise that seemed to vibrate through the plaster. Whatever Martin was moving, it was big. A dresser, maybe, or a bookcase. It went on for almost a minute before stopping, replaced by a heavy thud that made my light fixture tremble. I waited, expecting silence. Instead, the dragging started again. Different direction this time, moving from what would have been his bedroom toward what I guessed was his living room. Another minute of scraping, another thud, then again, and again. For 3 hours, I lay in bed listening to Martin Kessler rearrange his furniture. Back and forth, room to room, the same pieces moved over and over in patterns that made no sense. By 3 a.m., I'd given up on sleep entirely. I sat in my kitchen drinking coffee and staring at the ceiling, tracking the movements above me like I was mapping them. The noise stopped at 3:47 a.m. I finally went to bed, exhausted and irritated, and slept through my first alarm. The next evening, I ran into Martin in the lobby while checking my mail. He looked the same as always, tired, rumpled, slightly distracted. I almost didn't say anything, but the sleeplessness had made me cranky. "Late night last night?" I asked, trying to keep my tone light. He blinked at me. "I'm sorry." "The furniture moving. It went on for a while." Something flickered across his face. Confusion, I thought at first, but there was something else underneath. Something that looked almost like fear. "I didn't move any furniture last night," he said slowly. "I went to bed around 10. Took a sleeping pill. I didn't wake up until morning." I stared at him. I heard it, right above my bedroom. Something heavy being dragged across the floor for hours. Martin's face had gone pale. He clutched his mail against his chest, knuckles white. "That's not possible," he whispered. "I would have heard it. I would have woken up." Well, someone was moving something up there. There's no one else. His voice was sharp now, almost frantic. "I live alone. I've lived alone for 15 years. There's no one else in my apartment." We stood there in the lobby, staring at each other. The radiator in the corner hissed softly. Rain tapped against the windows, steady and rhythmic. "I'm sorry," Martin said finally. I can't explain what you heard. But it wasn't me. I promise you, it wasn't me." He hurried past me toward the stairs, moving faster than I'd ever seen him move. I watched him go, a cold feeling settling in my stomach. He looked scared, genuinely, deeply scared. Not of me, not of a confrontation with a complaining neighbor, scared of something else. That night, the dragging started again at 12:15 a.m. I lay in bed, wide awake, and listened to it. The same pattern as before, bedroom to living room to bedroom, heavy scraping followed by heavy thuds, over and over, for hours. But this time, I did something different. Around 1 a.m., during a brief pause in the noise, I grabbed my phone and opened the ceiling with my flashlight, like I could somehow see through the plaster. Then I opened my notes app and started documenting. 12:15, dragging starts, bedroom area, 12:23, movement shifts toward living room, 12:31. Thud, pause, dragging resumes, 12:45, pattern repeats 102. Absolute silence for 4 minutes, 106, dragging resumes, faster now. By 2 a.m., I had 2 pages of notes. By 3 a.m., the pattern had become clear. Whatever was happening up there, it wasn't random. The sounds followed the same sequence, the same timing, over and over, like a recording on loop, like something that had happened once and was now playing back, endlessly, into the night. The next morning, I knocked on Martin's door. No answer. I knocked again, called his name, pressed my ear to the wood and listened for movement. Nothing. Just silence, thick and absolute. I told myself he was probably out, running errands, getting coffee, living his life like a normal person. But something told me that wasn't true. Something told me Martin Kessler wasn't in his apartment anymore. And something told me that whatever I'd been hearing, whatever was dragging furniture across his floor night after night, wasn't him. I reported my concerns to the building super the next afternoon. His name was Daryl, a heavy-set man in his 50s who lived in the basement unit and handled maintenance requests with the enthusiasm of someone counting the days until retirement. He listened to me explain that I hadn't seen Martin in 2 days, that he wasn't answering his door, that I was worried something might have happened. "He's probably visiting family," Daryl said, not looking up from the crossword puzzle on his desk. "People do that sometimes." He said he lives alone, has for 15 years. Then maybe he went on a trip. Retirees do that too. I wanted to argue, but I didn't have anything concrete to offer. I couldn't exactly tell him that I'd heard furniture being dragged around Martin's apartment for hours while Martin claimed to be asleep, or that the sounds had continued even after Martin stopped answering his door. It sounded insane even in my own head. Can you at least do a wellness check? I asked. Just knock on his door. Make sure he's okay. Daryl sighed heavily, like I'd asked him to climb Everest. Fine. I'll knock tomorrow. Happy? I wasn't happy, but it was something. That night, the dragging started at 11:52 p.m. I'd gone to bed early, hoping to get some sleep before it began. No such luck. The scraping sound cut through my half-dreams like a saw blade, dragging me back to consciousness. I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, listening to the same impossible sounds. This time, I noticed something new. Between the dragging and the thuds, in the brief moments of silence, I heard something else. A rhythmic sound, soft and repetitive. It took me a few minutes to place it. Breathing, heavy, labored breathing, directly above my bed. Like someone who'd been exerting themselves, like someone who'd been moving furniture for hours and was exhausted but couldn't stop. I sat up. The breathing continued, loud enough to hear through the ceiling, loud enough that whoever was making it had to be lying on the floor directly above me. In, out, in, out, ragged and slow. Then the dragging started again, and the breathing was lost beneath the scrape of wood on wood. I didn't sleep at all that night. I sat in my living room with every light on, listening to the sounds overhead, trying to convince myself there was an explanation. Martin had a friend staying with him. Martin had come back and was rearranging his apartment in the middle of the night for reasons I couldn't fathom. Martin was having some kind of episode, a breakdown, something that explained the erratic behavior. But I'd knocked on his door. I'd called his name, and there had been no response. Not a voice, not a footstep, not a single sign of human presence. Just the dragging. Always the dragging. The next morning, I caught Daryl in the lobby before he could disappear into his basement lair. "Did you check on Martin?" He looked uncomfortable, shifted his weight from foot to foot. "Yeah," I knocked. No answer. "Did you go in? I can't just go into a tenant's apartment. Something's wrong." I grabbed his arm, harder than I meant to. I've been hearing sounds from up there every night, furniture moving, something heavy being dragged around. But Martin's not answering his door. He's not responding to anything. Something is wrong. Daryl pulled his arm free, but I saw something flicker in his eyes. Concern, maybe, or recognition. "You've been hearing furniture moving," he repeated slowly. "Every night, for hours, starting around midnight." He was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was lower. "Come with me." He led me down to the basement, to a cramped office cluttered with maintenance supplies and old building records. He dug through a filing cabinet and pulled out a folder, thin, yellowed, held together with a rubber band that had lost its elasticity years ago. "The Bellwood's been around since 1952, he said. "I've been the super here for almost 30 years. Before me, it was my father." He opened the folder and spread the contents across his desk. "There's a reason apartment 4C has the cheapest rent in the building." I looked at the papers, incident reports mostly, handwritten notes on lined paper, some so old the ink had faded to a pale brown. Dates going back decades, 1978, 1985, 1991, 2003. Different handwriting, different years, but the same complaints. Furniture moving at night. Sounds from 4C after midnight. Dragging, scraping, thuds. New tenant hears noises upstairs. Previous tenant of 4C moved out suddenly. "It happens every few years," Daryl said. "Someone moves into 4C, stays for a while, then leaves. Sometimes they give notice. Sometimes they just disappear. And the next tenant always hears the same thing." I felt cold, despite the basement's warmth. "What happens to them? The ones who disappear?" "Usually they turn up eventually, moved away, started over somewhere else. We assume Martin did the same. He paused. But there have been a couple who never turned up at all. And no one's investigated? Investigated what? There's nothing to find. No signs of foul play, no evidence of anything wrong. Just an empty apartment and a bunch of noise complaints from whoever lives below. He gathered the papers back into the folder. I'm not saying I understand it. I'm just saying it's happened before. I stared at him. And you rented that apartment to Martin anyway? Knowing all this? People need places to live. And Martin was... He trailed off. Martin was different. He'd researched the building before he moved in, knew the history, said he was interested in it academically, said he wanted to study whatever was happening in 4C. Study it? He was a professor, folklore, I think, or anthropology, something like that. Daryl shrugged. He said if there was something in that apartment, he wanted to understand it. I thought about Martin's pale face in the lobby, the fear in his eyes when I'd mentioned the furniture moving, the way he'd hurried away from me like something was chasing him. I don't think he understood it, I said quietly. I think it understood him. That night, I didn't go to bed. I sat in the hallway outside my apartment, back against the wall, staring at the stairwell that led up to the 4th floor. At 12:07 a.m., the dragging started. I stood up, walked to the stairs, put my foot on the first step. The sound continued above me. Scrape, scrape, thud. Scrape, scrape, thud. The same pattern I'd been hearing for days, playing out in an empty apartment where no one was supposed to be. I climbed the stairs. I don't know what I expected to find. I don't know what I was hoping to accomplish. But I couldn't listen anymore without knowing. I couldn't lie in bed one more night, staring at the ceiling, imagining what was happening just a few feet above my head. I reached the 4th floor. The hallway was dark. One of the lights had burned out, and the door to 4C was closed. The sounds were louder here, unmistakable. Something massive being shoved across the floor, over and over. I raised my hand to knock. And from inside the apartment, the breathing started again. Loud, close, right on the other side of the door, waiting for me. I didn't knock. I stood there with my fist raised, frozen, listening to that wet, rasping breath on the other side of the wood. It was wrong, too slow, too deliberate, like something remembering how breathing was supposed to work. The dragging had stopped the moment I'd reached the landing. The entire building had gone silent except for that sound. In, out, in, out. Then, softly, almost too quiet to hear, a whisper. Help me. Martin's voice. Thin and broken, barely recognizable, but his voice, coming from directly behind the door. Martin? My own voice came out cracked. Martin, are you okay? Can you open the door? Silence. The breathing stopped. I pressed my ear against the wood, straining to hear anything. Footsteps, movement, some sign that he was coming to let me in. What I heard instead was dragging. It started at the far end of the apartment and moved toward me, getting louder with each second. Something heavy sliding across the floor, coming closer, closer. I stumbled backward, my shoulder hitting the opposite wall. The sound reached the door and stopped. Then the door shuddered. Once, twice, like something on the other side was throwing itself against the wood. I ran. I don't remember going down the stairs. I just remember being in my apartment suddenly, door locked, deadbolt thrown, back pressed against the wall, and my heart trying to break through my ribs. I stood there for what felt like hours, listening for sounds in the hallway, waiting for something to follow me down. Nothing did. The building stayed quiet. Eventually, the sun came up. I called the police that morning. They sent 2 officers, a young woman with a clipboard and an older man who looked like he'd seen everything and was tired of it. I told them my neighbor was missing. that I'd heard strange sounds from his apartment, that I was worried something had happened to him. They took notes, asked questions, said they'd check it out. Daryl let them into 4C with his master key. I waited in the hallway, arms crossed, watching them disappear inside. They were in there for less than 5 minutes. "Apartment's empty," the older officer said when they came out. "No sign of struggle, no sign of forced entry. Looks like he just left." "Left?" "His car is still in the parking lot. I've checked. People leave cars behind sometimes, especially if they're trying to start over somewhere new. I heard his voice last night, coming from inside that apartment. He said, 'Help me.'" The officers exchanged a look, the kind of look people give each other when they think you're losing your grip on reality. "There's no one in there," the younger officer said, not unkindly. "We checked every room, every closet. The apartment is empty. Maybe you heard something from outside? Voices carry strangely in old buildings." I wanted to argue. I wanted to grab them by the shoulders and shake them and make them understand. But I could see it in their faces. They'd already decided I was the problem. A paranoid neighbor, imagining things, wasting their time. They left. Daryl locked 4C behind them, and I was left standing in the hallway, alone, with the absolute certainty that something was very, very wrong. I didn't hear anything that night, or the next. For almost a week, the apartment above me was silent. No footsteps, no dragging, no breathing. I started to sleep again, fitfully, always with one ear tuned to the ceiling. I started to wonder if maybe I had imagined it all. Then I found Martin's journal. It was in the basement, tucked behind a shelf of old paint cans in a storage area Daryl had told me I could use. A leather-bound notebook, worn at the edges, filled with dense handwriting that I recognized from the notes I'd seen in Martin's mailbox. He must have hidden it there deliberately, somewhere outside his apartment, somewhere it might be found if something happened to him. I took it upstairs and read it cover to cover. Martin had been researching 4C for years before he ever moved in. The journal was full of accounts he'd collected, interviews with former tenants, newspaper clippings about disappearances, references to obscure texts about hauntings and possession, and things that lived in the spaces between walls. He'd tracked down the building's original blueprints, documented every strange incident, built a case file that stretched back to the Bellwoods construction. The building was built on a cemetery, not a formal one, nothing marked on any maps. An old potter's field from the 1800s, where the city buried the bodies of people no one claimed. Vagrants, criminals, the poor, and the forgotten. When they built the Bellwood in 1952, they hadn't bothered to move the graves. They'd just poured concrete over them and built upward. According to Martin's research, apartment 4C sat directly above a section of the field where over a dozen bodies had been buried. Bodies that were never exhumed, never relocated, still there, 60 feet below the foundation. But that wasn't what scared me. What scared me was the last entry in the journal, dated April 2nd, 2 days before I'd first heard the furniture moving. "It's learning," Martin had written. "Whatever is in 4C, it's not just repeating the past anymore. It's aware. It knows I've been studying it. It knows I've been trying to understand." Last night, it spoke to me. It used the voice of my mother. She's been dead for 30 years, but I heard her as clearly as if she were standing beside me. She told me to come upstairs. She told me there was something I needed to see. I didn't go, but I wanted to. God help me. I wanted to. I think that's how it works. It learns what you respond to. It finds the voice that will make you open the door. And once you open the door, you don't come back. I closed the journal. My hands were shaking. I thought about the whisper I'd heard through the door. "Help me," in a voice that sounded like Martin's. It had already learned my voice. Now it was just waiting for me to answer. I should have left that night, packed a bag, walked out, never looked back. That's what any rational person would have done after reading that journal. But I kept thinking about Martin, the tired man in the cardigan who'd apologized for his pacing, who'd spent years trying to understand something that couldn't be understood. He'd gone into that apartment, and he hadn't come out. I couldn't just leave him there. The sound started again at 11:43 p.m. I was sitting in my living room, Martin's journal open on my lap, when I heard the first scrape overhead. My whole body went rigid. I sat there, barely breathing, as the familiar pattern played out above me. Drag, drag, thud, drag, drag, thud. The same sequence I'd heard a dozen times now, mechanical and precise. Then something changed. The dragging stopped abruptly, mid-scrape. Silence fell, thick, expectant. I stared at the ceiling, watching the shadow of my light fixture sway slightly from vibrations I couldn't feel. A knock, not from the hallway, from directly above, on the floor of apartment 4C. Knock, knock, knock. 3 slow, deliberate impacts, like someone on their hands and knees, tapping on the floor, trying to get my attention. Then a voice, muffled by wood and plaster, but unmistakable. I found it. What I was looking for. Come see. Martin's voice, but wrong somehow. The cadence was off, the words too carefully pronounced, like someone reading from a script they didn't quite understand. I didn't answer. I didn't move. Please. The voice again, pleading now. I need your help. I'm right here. I've been here the whole time. My throat tightened. I thought about what Martin had written. It finds the voice that will make you open the door. You're not Martin, I said out loud. My voice came out thin, reedy. Whatever you are, you're not him. Silence. The kind of silence that feels like something is listening. Then laughter. Soft at first, then building. A chuckling that echoed through the ceiling, bounced off the walls, filled my apartment with its wrongness. It didn't sound like Martin anymore. It didn't sound like anyone. It was too many voices layered together, overlapping, fighting for space. The laughing stopped. Then come see what I am. Every light in my apartment went out. I scrambled for my phone, hands shaking so badly I nearly dropped it. The screen lit up, 2% battery of course, and I fumbled to the flashlight app. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating my living room in stark white fragments. The dragging started again, but it wasn't coming from above anymore. It was coming from my hallway, from inside my apartment. I spun around, flashlight beam swinging wildly. The hallway to my bedroom was a tunnel of shadow, impenetrable beyond the first few feet, and from somewhere in that darkness came the sound. Something heavy being pulled across my floor, getting closer with each passing second. I backed toward the front door. My hip hit the dining table. I reached behind me, groping for the doorknob, never taking my eyes off that hallway. The dragging stopped. In the silence, I heard breathing, that same wet, labored breathing I'd heard through the ceiling. But now, it was in my apartment. Now it was between me and my bedroom, waiting in the dark. My hand found the doorknob, turned it, pulled. The door didn't move. I yanked harder, twisted the lock, the deadbolt. Nothing worked. The door was sealed, fused to its frame like it had never been designed to open. From the hallway, a shape emerged. I couldn't make out details. My flashlight flickered, dimmed, as though something was draining its power. But I could see the outline, tall, wrong, limbs that bent at angles that didn't make sense, a head that hung at an impossible tilt, and behind it, dragged by one twisted arm, a body, Martin's body. I recognized his cardigan, his wire-rimmed glasses, cracked and hanging from one ear. His face, slack and gray, eyes open and staring at nothing. He was being pulled across my floor like a piece of furniture, and the thing pulling him moved with that same mechanical rhythm I'd been hearing for days. Drag, drag, thud. The sound hadn't been furniture at all. It had never been furniture. He opened the door, the thing said. Its voice came from everywhere, from the walls, from the floor, from inside my own head. He wanted to understand. Now he does. Now he's part of it, part of us. It stepped closer. Martin's body slid along behind it, leaving a dark smear on my hardwood. You heard us, it continued. Every night you listened. That's all we needed. A connection, a thread to follow. I pressed my back against the door. The flashlight died completely, plunging the room into total darkness. I could still hear it moving, getting closer. I could smell it now. Old earth and rotting leaves and something else, something chemical and sweet. They buried us without names, without markers, without anyone to remember. The voice was right in front of me now. I could feel cold breath on my face, feel the air displacement as something massive loomed inches away. We've been waiting so long for someone to hear us, and now you have. A hand closed around my wrist. It was cold, so cold it burned. Fingers that felt like they were made of ice and bone wrapped around my arm, gripping with impossible strength. You're going to help us remember, it whispered. You're going to help us become real again. I screamed, wrenched backward with everything I had, and somehow, I don't know how, the door gave way behind me. I tumbled into the hallway, scrambled to my feet, and ran. Down the stairs, through the lobby, out the front door, into the cold night air. I didn't stop until I was 3 blocks away, gasping for breath, my wrist throbbing where those fingers had gripped. I looked back at the Bellwood Arms, 4th floor, apartment 4C. A figure stood in the window, tall and dark and utterly still, watching me, waiting for me to come back. I never went back inside. I spent that night in a 24-hour diner 3 miles from the Bellwood, drinking coffee I didn't taste and watching the sun come up through grease-streaked windows. My wrist still ached where those fingers had gripped me. When I finally looked at it in the morning light, I saw bruises, 4 distinct marks, deep purple against my skin, shaped like fingerprints but too long, too narrow to be human. I called Daryl from the diner, told him I was breaking my lease, effective immediately. He started to argue about deposits and notice periods, but something in my voice must have stopped him. You went up there, he said quietly. Didn't you? I need my things, my clothes, my laptop. Can you have someone pack them and leave them in the lobby? I'll pay whatever it costs. A long pause. I'll do it myself. Give me a few hours. I waited until noon, then drove back. Daryl had left 2 boxes by the mailboxes, neatly packed with my essentials. Most of my furniture, my books, everything else. I left it all behind. I couldn't imagine going back into that apartment, even in daylight. I couldn't imagine being in that building ever again. I loaded the boxes into my car. Daryl was waiting in the lobby doorway, watching me with an expression I couldn't read. Did you find Martin? I asked. He shook his head slowly. Apartment's empty, same as before. No sign of anyone. I saw his body. It was dragging his body. There's nothing up there. His voice was firm, but his eyes told a different story. Whatever you think you saw, there's no evidence of it. No body, no blood, nothing. I wanted to argue. I wanted to show him the bruises on my wrist, make him believe what I'd witnessed. But I knew it wouldn't matter. The thing in 4C didn't leave evidence. It didn't work that way. It took people, and it erased them, absorbed them into whatever mass of forgotten dead lay beneath the building's foundation. The journal, I said. Martin's journal. I left it in my apartment. Daryl's face went carefully blank. I didn't see any journal. It was on my coffee table, leather-bound, filled with his research. There was no journal. He stepped back into the lobby, hand on the door. I think you should go now. And I think you should forget about the Bellwood. Forget about Martin. Forget about all of it. The door closed between us. I drove away and didn't look back. That was 8 months ago. I live in a different city now. A new apartment, ground floor, no one above me. I told myself it was for practical reasons. Easier move-in, no stairs to climb, better access to the parking lot. But I know the truth. I can't stand the thought of someone walking over my head while I sleep. I can't hear footsteps on a ceiling without my heart rate spiking, without my hands starting to shake. I tried to find information about the Potter's Field Martin had written about. Spent weeks digging through historical records, municipal archives, anything that might confirm what he'd discovered. I found fragments, references to unmarked burials in that part of the city during the 1800s, complaints from construction workers in the 1950s about disturbed ground, unexplained delays in the Bellwood's construction, but nothing definitive. Nothing I could point to and say, this is proof. Martin's research disappeared with him. Whatever he'd learned, whatever he'd documented, it was gone now, absorbed into the same void that had taken him. I still have nightmares. They're always the same. I'm lying in bed in my old apartment, staring at the ceiling, listening to the dragging start. But in the dream, I get up. I walk to the stairs. I climb to the 4th floor. And when I reach the door to 4C, it's already open. The apartment inside is vast, impossibly vast, stretching into darkness far beyond what the building's walls should allow. And standing in that darkness, waiting for me, are figures. Dozens of them. Hundreds. All the forgotten dead. All the nameless bodies buried beneath the foundation. All the people who disappeared from that apartment over the decades. Martin is there too. He stands at the front of the crowd, still wearing his cardigan, his glasses repaired, and sitting straight on his nose. He looks peaceful, content, like he finally found what he was looking for. "You heard us," he says in the dream. "That's all we ever wanted. Someone to hear us, someone to remember." Then he reaches out his hand, and every time, just before I wake up, I take it. I don't know what happened in apartment 4C. I don't know what those things really were. Ghosts, demons, something older and stranger that doesn't have a name. I don't know if Martin is dead, or if he's become something else entirely, absorbed into a collective of forgotten souls that exists in the space between the walls. What I do know is this: they're still there, still waiting, still dragging whatever remains across those floors, night after night, hoping someone will hear. I check the Bellwood's rental listing sometimes. Morbid curiosity, I guess. The same impulse that makes people slow down at accident scenes. Apartment 4C comes up every few months. The rent is always low, always the cheapest in the building, and every time it gets filled. I wonder about the new tenants. I wonder if they hear the sounds at night, if they brush it off as old building noises, if they tell themselves they're imagining things. I wonder how long they'll last before they start asking questions, or before they stop asking anything at all. Sometimes I think about warning them, finding their names somehow, sending an anonymous letter, telling them to get out while they still can. But what would I say? What could I possibly tell them that would make any difference? Don't listen to the sounds at night. Don't go upstairs when you hear your name. Don't open the door, no matter whose voice is on the other side. They wouldn't believe me. No one ever believes. Not until it's too late. So I stay quiet. I live my life. I sleep on the ground floor and try not to think about what's happening in a building 300 miles away. But I still hear it sometimes, late at night in the space between waking and sleeping. The dragging, the breathing, the soft, patient knock, and a voice that sounds like mine, whispering through the ceiling. Help me. I'm right here. I've been here the whole time. I don't answer. I never answer. but every night it gets a little harder to stay silent. Story 2. My security camera detected a person in the living room. The notification came at 3:17 a.m. I was 200 miles away in a hotel room in Cincinnati for a work conference when my phone buzzed on the nightstand. I almost ignored it, figured it was spam or a weather alert or one of the dozen apps that think 3 a.m. is an appropriate time to remind you about a sale. But something made me reach for it anyway, some instinct I couldn't explain. Motion detected, living room. The notification sat there on my lock screen, innocuous and terrifying at the same time. Below it, a thumbnail image too small to make out clearly. I tapped it. The app opened to a still frame from my security camera. Grainy, washed out by the infrared night vision, but clear enough to see what had triggered the alert. A person, standing in the middle of my living room, facing the camera. I sat up in bed, suddenly wide awake, heart hammering against my ribs. The image was frozen, a single frame captured at the moment of detection. The figure was tall, taller than me, wearing what looked like dark clothing. I couldn't make out features. The face was just a pale smear, featureless, turned toward the lens, like they knew exactly where the camera was, like they were posing for it. I fumbled to access the live feed. My hands were shaking so badly I had to enter my password 3 times. The app buffered, that spinning wheel of death that felt like it lasted hours. Then the feed loaded. The living room was empty. I stared at the screen, watching the familiar shapes of my furniture rendered in ghostly green-gray. The couch where I'd spent countless evenings watching TV. The coffee table with its perpetual stack of magazines I never read. The bookshelf against the far wall. Everything exactly as I'd left it. No person, no movement, nothing. I switched to the recorded footage, rewound to 3:17, watched the timestamp tick forward. At 3:17:04, a figure stepped into frame from the left side, from the direction of my kitchen. They walked slowly, deliberately, to the center of the room, stopped, turned to face the camera, stood there for exactly 11 seconds. Then they walked out of frame to the right, toward my bedroom. I called 911, explained the situation. I was out of town. My security camera had detected an intruder. Someone was in my house right now. The dispatcher was calm, professional, asked for my address, told me to stay on the line. I heard her relay the information, request a unit. I sat in my hotel room in Cincinnati with the phone pressed to my ear, watching my empty living room on a 4-inch screen, waiting. The police arrived in 12 minutes. I watched them on the exterior camera, 2 officers approaching my front door, flashlights out. One of them knocked, called out. Then they went around back, and I lost visual. 15 minutes later, my phone rang. A detective calling to follow up. "House is clear," he said. "No sign of forced entry. All doors and windows secure. We checked every room, every closet. There's no one here." "I have footage. I can show you." "We saw the footage. Your app saves to the cloud, right? We accessed it on your tablet." He paused. "Look, I'm not going to lie to you. Whatever that camera caught, it's strange. But the house is empty. No one's here now." They walked toward my bedroom. On the footage, you can see them walk toward my bedroom. And we checked the bedroom, checked under the bed, in the closet, behind the door. Nothing. Another pause. "You sure no one else has access to your place? Family member, ex-partner, someone with a spare key?" "No. No one." "Could be a glitch in the system. These cameras aren't perfect. Sometimes they pick up reflections, shadows, things that look like people but aren't." I wanted to argue. That wasn't a reflection. That wasn't a shadow. That was a person, tall, solid, real, standing in my living room in the middle of the night. But I could hear it in his voice. He'd already made up his mind. Glitch in the system. Nothing to worry about. Case closed. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. I sat in my hotel room watching the live feed, waiting for the figure to return. It didn't. The house stayed empty, stayed still, stayed exactly the way a house is supposed to look when no one is home. I cut the conference short, made up an excuse about a family emergency, apologized to my boss, drove the 4 hours back home with the camera feed playing on my phone in the passenger seat. Every time I glanced at it, the living room was empty, but I couldn't shake the image of that figure, the way they'd stopped in the center of the room, the way they'd turned to face the camera, the way they'd known exactly where it was. I got home around 2 p.m., sat in my car in the driveway for almost 10 minutes, working up the courage to go inside. The house looked the same as always, a modest 2-story in a quiet subdivision, the kind of place where nothing bad was supposed to happen. I'd lived there for 3 years. I knew every creak in the floors, every rattle in the pipes. It was my home. But it didn't feel like my home anymore. I went inside, did my own search, every room, every closet, every space large enough to hide a person. I checked the attic, the basement, the garage. I looked behind shower curtains and under beds and inside cabinets that no adult could possibly fit into. Nothing. No one. Just my house, exactly as I'd left it, silent and still in the afternoon light. I checked the doors, all locked, the windows, all latched, the security system, armed, with no record of being triggered or disabled. According to every metric I had, no one had entered my house, but the footage didn't lie. Someone had been in my living room at 3:17 a.m., and they'd walked toward my bedroom. I installed 3 more cameras that evening, one in the hallway, one in the kitchen, one in my bedroom facing the door. I told myself it was precaution, peace of mind, the rational response to an irrational situation. But part of me knew the truth. Part of me knew that whatever I'd seen on that footage wasn't finished. I just didn't know what it wanted. Not yet. 3 days passed without incident. I started to relax, told myself the detective was probably right, that it had been some kind of glitch, a trick of light and shadow that the camera's algorithm had interpreted as a person. These things happened. Technology wasn't perfect. I'd read articles about security cameras triggered by spiders crawling across the lens, by headlights sweeping through windows, by the subtle shift of curtains and air conditioning drafts. My brain had seen a shape and filled in the rest, constructed a narrative of intrusion where none existed. I almost believed it. Then the second notification came. It was 2:48 a.m. on a Thursday. I was home this time, asleep in my bedroom, when my phone buzzed on the nightstand. The sound pulled me out of a dream I couldn't remember, left me disoriented and groggy in the dark. I reached for the phone automatically, squinting against the brightness of the screen. Motion detected. Hallway. I was out of bed before I fully processed what I was reading. I stood in my dark bedroom, phone clutched in my hand, staring at the closed door that led to the hallway. The hallway where my camera had just detected motion. The hallway that was 15 feet from where I was standing. I opened the app with trembling fingers. The thumbnail showed a figure. The same figure, I was certain. The same tall silhouette in dark clothing, standing in my hallway. Facing the bedroom door. Facing me. I didn't breathe. Didn't move. Just stood there in the dark, listening. The house was silent. No footsteps. No creaking floorboards. No sound of breathing from the other side of the door. Just the hum of the air conditioner and the thunder of my own pulse in my ears. I switched to the live feed. The hallway was empty. I watched for almost a minute, waiting for movement, waiting for the figure to step back into frame. Nothing happened. The hallway remained still, the familiar shapes of my life rendered in that eerie night vision green. I didn't open the bedroom door. I stood there until the sun came up, until light crept under the door and filled the room with the ordinary glow of morning. Then I checked the footage. The figure had appeared at 2:48:12, walked into frame from the direction of the living room, stopped outside my bedroom door, stood there for 23 seconds. 23 seconds while I lay sleeping on the other side, completely unaware. Then it turned and walked back the way it came. Out of frame. Out of sight. I called a security company that morning. Had them send someone out to inspect the system, check for malfunctions, verify that the cameras were working properly. The technician was thorough. Tested every connection, examined every lens, ran diagnostics on the software. Everything checked out. The system was functioning exactly as designed. Could be someone actually entering the house, he said, packing up his equipment. These cameras don't lie. If they're detecting a person-shaped heat signature, there's a person-shaped heat signature to detect. The police searched the house. They didn't find anyone. He shrugged. Then they're good at hiding or good at leaving before anyone can catch them. He handed me his card. You might want to consider upgrading to a system with real-time monitoring. Someone watching the feeds 24/7, ready to dispatch help the moment something happens. I thanked him. Didn't mention that I'd been watching the feeds myself, that I'd seen the figure standing outside my bedroom door while I was 15 feet away, separated by nothing but a thin piece of wood. That night, I didn't sleep in the bedroom. I moved to the living room, set up camp on the couch with a clear view of the front door and the hallway entrance. I kept my phone in my hand, the camera app open, cycling through feeds every few minutes. I told myself I was being proactive, taking control of the situation. Really, I was terrified. The notification came at 3:33 a.m. Motion detected. Kitchen. I was awake instantly, thumb already moving to open the feed. The kitchen camera showed the figure standing by the counter, facing the refrigerator, not moving, not doing anything, just standing there, motionless, like a mannequin someone had placed in my house as a joke. I could see the kitchen from where I sat. The doorway was maybe 20 feet away, a dark rectangle leading into deeper darkness. The camera showed someone standing in there, right now. But when I looked with my own eyes, I saw nothing. Just shadows. Just the ordinary shapes of my kitchen at night. I raised my phone. On the screen, the figure turned. Slowly. Deliberately. Rotating its body until it was facing the doorway. Facing the living room. Facing me. I couldn't see features. The night vision washed everything out, turned the face into a pale, featureless oval. But I could feel it looking at me. Through the camera, through the screen, through the walls that separated us. It was looking at me. Then it started walking. On the screen, the figure moved toward the kitchen doorway, toward the living room, toward where I sat, frozen on the couch, watching my own house become a nightmare. I looked up from the phone, stared at the kitchen doorway. In the darkness, something moved. Not a shape I could define. Not a person I could see. Just movement. A shifting of shadows. A displacement of air. The sense that something had passed from one room into another. The notification chimed again. Motion detected. Living room. I looked at the screen. The living room camera showed me sitting on my couch, showed the coffee table, the bookshelf, the TV, and standing behind me, close enough to touch, was the figure. I spun around. Nothing there. I looked at the screen. The figure was gone. The living room showed only me, wild-eyed and pale, twisted around on the couch, staring at empty space. But on the footage, on the recording that was even now being saved to the cloud, there was a figure standing behind me. And for the first time, I could see its face. It was my face, identical in every way, except for the smile. That wide, wrong smile that stretched too far, showed too many teeth. It was me, standing behind me, smiling, and I had no idea what that meant. I didn't sleep that night, didn't even try. I sat on the couch with every light in the house blazing, watching the camera feed cycle on my phone until my eyes burned and my hands cramped from gripping the device. The figure didn't appear again, but I couldn't stop seeing it. That face, my face, twisted into a smile that no human expression should make. By morning, I'd convinced myself I was losing my mind. That had to be the explanation. Stress, sleep deprivation, some kind of mental break triggered by the initial scare. The cameras weren't showing a real person. They were showing a manifestation of my own paranoia, my brain projecting its fears onto ambiguous shapes and shadows. I needed help. Professional help. I called my doctor, made an appointment for that afternoon, described my symptoms, anxiety, insomnia, possible hallucinations. She listened carefully, asked questions, ran some basic tests. Everything came back normal. She prescribed a mild sedative to help me sleep and referred me to a psychiatrist for follow-up. "It's probably just stress," she said, writing out the prescription. "Our minds can do strange things when we're not getting enough rest. Try to relax, take the medication, see how you feel in a few days." I filled the prescription. I didn't take it. Because that night, while I was sitting in my kitchen trying to force down some dinner, I got another notification. Motion detected. Bedroom. I opened the feed. The bedroom camera showed my bed, neatly made, exactly as I'd left it. And sitting on the edge of the mattress, hands folded in its lap, was the figure. My figure. My face. That smile. It was looking directly at the camera, directly at me. As I watched, it raised one hand slowly and waved. I dropped my phone. The screen cracked against the tile floor, spiderwebbing across the display, but the image was still visible. The figure was still there, still waving, still smiling that impossible smile. Then it stood up, walked to my dresser, opened the top drawer, the drawer where I kept personal things, private things, items I'd never shown anyone. It reached inside, pulled something out. I couldn't tell what from the grainy footage. It turned back to the camera and held up the object, a photograph. The edges were worn, the image faded with age. I knew that photograph. I knew it because I'd hidden it in that drawer 5 years ago and hadn't looked at it since. It was a picture of my mother, taken 6 months before she died. The figure held the photograph up to its face, my face, and pressed its lips against my mother's image. A kiss, tender and deliberate. Then it looked at the camera again, smile widening, and mouthed 2 words. "Miss Her." I threw up in the kitchen sink, stood there retching until there was nothing left, until my stomach was empty and my throat was raw. When I finally straightened up, wiped my mouth, looked at my cracked phone screen. The bedroom was empty. I went upstairs. I had to. I had to know. The bedroom door was closed. I remembered leaving it open that morning. I stood in the hallway, hand on the knob, listening. No sound from inside, no movement, just silence and the pounding of my own heart. I opened the door. The room looked normal. Bed still made. Curtains still drawn. Nothing out of place. I walked to the dresser, pulled open the top drawer. The photograph was gone. I searched everywhere. Tore through the drawer, checked the floor, looked under the bed and behind the furniture. The photograph wasn't there. It had been in that drawer for 5 years, untouched. And now it was gone. Something had taken it. Something that looked like me. I spent the next 3 days researching. I didn't know what I was looking for, didn't even know the right terms to search, but I dove into the internet with the desperation of someone drowning. Doppelgangers, shadow people, fetch, Vardöger. I read folklore from a dozen cultures, accounts of people who'd seen their own doubles, theories about parallel dimensions and time loops and tulpas manifested through focused thought. Nothing quite fit. Nothing explained a figure that appeared only on cameras, that could interact with the physical world, that wore my face with a smile that wasn't mine. Then I found a forum. It was buried deep in the search results, an old site with outdated design and a handful of active users. The thread that caught my attention was titled, "It looks like me on camera, but I can't see it." I read the original post 3 times, a woman in Nebraska 8 years ago describing exactly what I was experiencing. Security cameras capturing a figure with her face, movement through her house at night, objects moved, touched, taken. She couldn't see the entity with her own eyes, only through the cameras, only through the electronic medium of recorded footage. The thread had dozens of replies. Some were skeptical, dismissive, but others shared similar stories. A man in Scotland, a teenager in Japan, a family in Brazil who all saw the same thing, a double of the father, appearing on their home security system night after night. And then, halfway down the thread, a reply that made my blood run cold. User deleted posted. It's not imitating you. It's practicing. I scrolled down. The post continued. The longer you watch it, the better it gets. It's learning how you move, how you speak, how you live. It's studying you through the cameras, just like you're studying it. And when it's learned enough, the rest of the post was gone. Removed by moderators or deleted by the user, I couldn't tell, but the implication hung there, unfinished, terrifying. When it's learned enough. What happened then? I looked at the original poster's username, clicked on her profile. Her last activity was 2 days after she'd started the thread, 8 years ago. No posts, no replies, no sign of life since then. I searched her username across other sites. Found a news article from Nebraska, dated 1 week after her final post. Local woman found dead in home. Cause of death under investigation. The article included a detail that made me stop breathing. Neighbors reported seeing the woman moving around her house for several days after the estimated time of death. Police dismissed the sightings as mistaken identity, but I knew better. I knew exactly what those neighbors had seen. Something wearing her face. Something that had finished practicing. I looked up from my laptop. Looked at the security camera mounted in the corner of my living room. Its little red light blinked steadily back at me, recording everything I did. I tore down the cameras that night, every single one, ripped them from the walls, disconnected the cables, threw them in a garbage bag, and hauled the bag to the curb. I didn't care about the money I'd spent. I didn't care about home security or peace of mind, or any of the reasons I'd installed them in the first place. The cameras were how it watched me. The cameras were how it learned. Without them, maybe it would stop, maybe it would starve, fade away, find someone else to study. For 2 days, nothing happened. No notifications. I'd deleted the app. No figures in the corners of my vision. No sense of being watched. I started to breathe again. Started to think that maybe I'd solved it. That the solution had been that simple all along. Just stop looking. Just remove the eyes. On the 3rd night, my neighbor knocked on my door. Her name was Diane, a retired school teacher who lived in the house across the street. We weren't close, but we were friendly. The kind of neighbors who waved at each other while getting the mail, who made small talk about the weather and local gossip. She was standing on my porch with a casserole dish in her hands and a strange expression on her face. "I wanted to check on you," she said. "Make sure everything was okay." "I'm fine." "Why?" She hesitated, glanced past me into the house like she was looking for something. "It's just, I saw you last night, walking around your backyard around 3 a.m. I couldn't sleep, and I happened to look out my window, and there you were." She tried to smile, but it didn't quite work. "I figured maybe you were sleepwalking or something, but then I saw you again tonight. Same time, same thing, just walking in circles in the yard, looking up at the house." My mouth went dry. That wasn't me. It looked exactly like you. Same height, same build. I couldn't see your face clearly, but... "Diane, I haven't left this house after dark in almost a week. I've been inside every night. Whatever you saw, it wasn't me." The color drained from her face. The casserole dish trembled in her hands. Then who? I didn't have an answer. I took the casserole, thanked her, closed the door, stood in my foyer with my back against the wood, trying to think. It didn't need the cameras anymore. It had learned enough. It was practicing in the real world now, walking around my property in the middle of the night, letting my neighbors see it, letting them think it was me. I called in sick to work the next morning. Then I called a friend, Marcus, someone I'd known since college, someone I trusted. I told him I needed help. I told him something was wrong and I couldn't explain it over the phone. He said he'd be there by noon. He arrived at 11:47. I watched him pull into the driveway, get out of his car, walk up to my front door. When I opened it, the relief on his face was immediate. Jesus, man, you look terrible. What's going on? I pulled him inside, locked the door, checked the windows. Then I told him everything. He listened without interrupting. I could see the skepticism building in his eyes, the slow realization that his friend might be having a breakdown. But he let me talk. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Have you seen a doctor? Yes. They think it's stress. Maybe they're right. Maybe. It's not stress, Marcus. I have footage. I stopped. I didn't have footage anymore. I'd deleted the app, thrown away the cameras. All the evidence I'd accumulated was gone. Look, Marcus said carefully, I believe that you believe something is happening. But what you're describing, it's not possible. People don't have doubles that show up on cameras. That's not how reality works. Then explain the woman in Nebraska. Explain all the other people who experienced the same thing. Internet forums aren't reliable sources. People make things up. They share stories, build on each other's paranoia. He put a hand on my shoulder. I think you need to get out of this house for a while. Come stay with me. Get some distance, some perspective. See how you feel after a few days away. I wanted to argue. I wanted to make him understand. But maybe he was right. Maybe distance would help. Maybe the thing was tied to the house somehow, bound to this location, and leaving would break whatever connection it had formed. Okay, I said. Let me pack a bag. I went upstairs. Marcus stayed in the living room, probably texting his wife to warn her that his unstable friend would be crashing at their place. I grabbed a duffel bag from my closet, started throwing in clothes, toiletries, the essentials. That's when I heard Marcus scream. I dropped the bag, ran for the stairs. The sound had been sharp, sudden, a cry of surprise and fear cut off almost immediately. I hit the bottom of the staircase and skidded into the living room. Marcus was on the floor, unconscious or dead, I couldn't tell. Standing over him, back turned to me, was a figure in my clothes. It turned around. My face looked back at me, my eyes, my nose, my mouth, but the expression was wrong. Too still, too blank, like a mask that hadn't quite learned how to move yet. As I watched, the features shifted, twitched. The mouth stretched into that smile I'd seen on the footage, too wide, too full of teeth. Almost ready, it said. My voice, but hollow, flat, like words being read from a script by someone who didn't understand their meaning. It took a step toward me, then another. I backed away, hit the wall, had nowhere else to go. I've been watching you for so long. Another step, close enough now that I could see the texture of its skin, not quite right, too smooth, like rubber or wax. Learning you, becoming you. What do you want? It tilted its head. The movement was wrong, jerky, mechanical. I want to be you, it said. I want your life, your face, your name. It reached for me. And you don't need those anymore. I don't remember deciding to fight. One moment I was pressed against the wall, paralyzed with terror. The next, I was swinging, a wild, desperate punch that connected with the thing's jaw. It felt wrong, Not like hitting a person, like hitting something solid wrapped in cloth, something that gave in unexpected places and resisted in others. It stumbled back. The smile flickered, faltered. For just a moment, I saw confusion cross that stolen face, my face, like it hadn't expected resistance, like all the people it had practiced on before had just let it happen. I grabbed Marcus under the arms. He was breathing, shallow, ragged, but alive. I dragged him toward the front door, keeping my eyes on the thing, watching it recover its balance. The smile was back now, but different, harder, less like a mask and more like something hungry. "You can't leave," it said. Still my voice, but with an edge now, a coldness. "I've worked too long for this, watched you for weeks, learned every gesture, every habit, every little piece of what makes you who you are." I reached the door, fumbled for the handle behind me. "Stay away from me." "Your mother's photograph. I know why you kept it hidden." It took a step closer. "I know about the guilt you carry. The last words you said to her. The things you wish you could take back." My hand found the doorknob, twisted. The door swung open behind me, letting in the gray afternoon light. The thing flinched. It was subtle, a tightening of the features, a slight lean backward, but I saw it. The light bothered it. Not the light from lamps or fixtures. Natural light. Daylight. I hauled Marcus through the door, out onto the porch. The thing followed but stopped at the threshold, that smile finally fading into something else. Frustration. Rage. It stood in the doorway, half in shadow, watching me drag my unconscious friend toward his car. "This doesn't end," it called after me. "I'm part of you now. I know everything about you. Wherever you go, I'll find another way in. Another set of eyes. Another camera." I got Marcus into the passenger seat, ran around to the driver's side. The keys were still in the ignition where he'd left them. "Every photo you take, every video call, every reflection in a screen." The thing was still in the doorway, still watching. "I'll be there, watching, learning, waiting." I started the car, backed out of the driveway without looking. The last thing I saw was my own face standing in the door of my house, smiling that terrible smile, waving goodbye. Marcus woke up an hour later in the emergency room. He didn't remember what had happened, just a blur, a sense of wrongness, then nothing. The doctors said he'd had some kind of seizure, maybe stress-induced, nothing to worry about. They kept him overnight for observation. I didn't tell him the truth. I couldn't. What would I say? A monster wearing my face knocked you unconscious because it's trying to steal my identity? He'd think I was insane. Everyone would think I was insane. I never went back to the house. I couldn't. The thing was right. It knew me now. Every camera in that house, every photo I'd taken, every video I'd been in, they were all windows, all access points. And as long as I was there, surrounded by the digital detritus of my life, it could find its way back. I sold the house remotely, hired movers to pack everything and put it in storage. Started over in a new city, a new apartment, a new life stripped of technology as much as modern existence allows. No security cameras, no video chats. I keep my phone camera covered with tape. I avoid photographs, avoid reflections in screens, avoid anything that might capture my image and transmit it somewhere the thing could see. It's been 2 years. Sometimes I wonder if it's still out there, wearing my face, living in my house. I imagine it answering my door when neighbors come by, going to my job, talking to my friends, slipping into my life like a hermit crab into a shell. Would anyone notice? Would anyone realize that the person they were talking to wasn't really me, just something that had learned to be me, practiced being me, perfected the performance over weeks of observation? I think about the woman from Nebraska sometimes, how she stopped posting, stopped existing, and then her neighbors saw her walking around after she was already dead. I wonder how long it took. wonder if she knew what was happening, if she fought back, if she had any warning at all. I wonder if she's still out there too. A copy, a replica, something wearing a face that was never its own. The hardest part is the paranoia. Every time I see a security camera in a store, a bank, a parking garage, I feel that prickle at the back of my neck. Every time someone takes a photo and I accidentally end up in the background, I spend days checking my reflection, making sure I still look like myself, making sure the smile is my own. Because here's the thing I can't stop thinking about. The thing that keeps me awake at night, staring at darkened screens that I've covered with cloth and tape and anything that will block them. It said it was practicing. It said it was learning to become me. But what if it already finished? What if the thing in my house wasn't practicing anymore? What if it was already done, already perfect, and what it was really doing was replacing me piece by piece, so slowly I didn't notice? What if I'm the copy? What if the real me is still back in that house, trapped, watching through cameras that don't show anything unusual anymore because the unusual has already won? I look in the mirror every morning. I study my face. I try to remember if my smile always looked like this, if my eyes always sat at this angle, if the way I move my hands is the way I've always moved them. I can't tell anymore. I can't be sure. And late at night, when I'm alone and the apartment is quiet, I sometimes catch myself smiling. A wide smile, stretching too far, showing too many teeth. I don't know why I'm smiling. I don't feel happy. I don't feel anything at all. But I smile anyway. And somewhere, somehow, I know that something is smiling back. Story 3, the bus route that didn't exist on the map. I've taken public transit my entire life. Growing up in the city, it was just how you got around. My mother never owned a car, so I learned the bus system the way other kids learn to ride bikes. Muscle memory, second nature, the routes and schedules burned into my brain before I finished middle school. By the time I started college, I could navigate the entire metropolitan area without looking at a map. I knew which buses ran late, which drivers would wait if they saw you running, which stops had shelters, and which left you standing in the rain. That's why what happened to me doesn't make sense. I knew those routes. I knew them better than I knew my own neighborhood. But I'd never seen the 56 before. It was a Thursday in late November, one of those days where the rain starts before dawn and doesn't stop until well after dark. I'd been at the university library until almost 10 p.m., finishing a paper that was due the next morning. The kind of procrastination-fueled marathon session that leaves you bleary-eyed and desperate for sleep. When I finally packed up my laptop and headed for the bus stop, the campus was nearly deserted, just a few other stragglers hurrying through the downpour, umbrellas bent against the wind. The stop I used was on the corner of Ashland and 32nd, a covered shelter with a cracked plastic bench and a schedule board that hadn't been updated in years. The 14 was supposed to come every 20 minutes until midnight, then every hour after that. I'd taken it hundreds of times, knew every stop on the route, every turn, the exact spot where the driver always hit that one pothole near the park. I checked my phone. 10:17 p.m. The 14 should arrive in 3 minutes. The rain hammered against the shelter roof, a constant roar that drowned out everything else. I sat on the bench, huddled in my jacket, watching the street through curtains of water. The streetlights turned the rain into gold, each drop glittering as it fell, beautiful in a miserable sort of way. At 10:20, a bus appeared. It came from the wrong direction. That was the first thing I noticed. The 14 always approached from the east, but this bus was coming from the west, emerging from the darkness beyond the campus like it had materialized out of nothing. Its headlights cut through the rain, impossibly bright, and I squinted against the glare as it pulled up to the stop. The doors hissed open. I looked at the route number displayed above the windshield. 56. There was no Route 56. I knew the system. Routes went up to 48. then jumped to the hundreds for the express lines. There was no 56, had never been a 56, and yet here it was. A bus, solid and real, idling at my stop with its doors open and its interior lights casting a warm yellow glow onto the wet pavement. The driver was a woman I didn't recognize, middle-aged, heavy-set, with graying hair pulled back in a tight bun. She looked at me through the open doors, expression neutral, waiting. "Is this..." I started, then stopped. "Is this what? A real bus? A figment of my imagination? Does this go downtown?" "Eventually," she said. Her voice was flat, disinterested. "You getting on or not?" I should have waited for the 14th. I knew that even then, some part of my brain screaming that this was wrong, that buses didn't just appear from nowhere with route numbers that didn't exist. But the rain was cold, and I was tired, and the bus was right there, warm and dry and going in what seemed like the right direction. I got on. The fare box looked normal. I tapped my transit card, heard the familiar beep of acceptance. The driver closed the doors behind me, and the bus pulled away from the curb, windshield wipers beating a steady rhythm against the rain. I made my way down the aisle, looking for a seat. The bus was nearly empty, just a handful of other passengers scattered throughout. An old man near the front, staring out the window at nothing. A young woman in the middle, headphones in, eyes closed. Two teenagers in the back whispering to each other in voices too low to hear. I sat down near the rear door, the spot I always chose for easy exit. Pulled out my phone to check the time, maybe track where we were going. No signal. Not low signal. No signal at all. The little bars in the corner were gone, replaced by a blank space where connectivity should be. I looked up, looked out the window. We weren't on Ashland anymore. The street outside was narrow, lined with buildings I didn't recognize. Old buildings, brick facades stained with age, windows dark and empty, awnings hanging in tatters over doors that looked like they hadn't been opened in decades. The streetlights were different too, older models, casting a dimmer, more orange light than the modern LEDs I was used to. I didn't know this neighborhood. I didn't know this street. The bus turned a corner, and the view shifted. More unfamiliar buildings, a church with a collapsed steeple, a row of storefronts with names I couldn't read, the letters worn away by time and weather. Everything looked abandoned. Everything looked wrong. I stood up, grabbed the cord to signal a stop. The bell dinged, a sound I'd heard thousands of times, but the bus didn't slow down. "Excuse me," I called toward the front. "I need to get off." The driver didn't respond, didn't even look at me in the mirror. "Hey," I pulled the cord. "I need to get off here." Nothing. The bus kept moving, turning down another street I'd never seen, taking me deeper into a city that couldn't exist. The rain pounded against the windows. The wipers squeaked back and forth, and the other passengers sat in their seats, motionless, silent, like they didn't notice anything unusual at all, like this was exactly where they expected to be. I looked at the old man near the front, at the woman with her headphones, at the teenagers in the back, no longer whispering, just staring straight ahead with blank expressions. None of them were breathing. I could see it now, watching closely. No rise and fall of chests, no fog of breath in the cold air that had somehow crept into the bus. They sat perfectly still, perfectly frozen, like mannequins arranged in seats. And the driver, reflected in the rearview mirror, was smiling. That's when I realized I wasn't going home. I wasn't sure I was going anywhere at all. I tried the emergency exit. The handle was there, right where it should be. That red lever you're supposed to pull to open the rear door in case of emergency. I grabbed it with both hands and yanked. Nothing happened. Yanked again, harder. The lever didn't budge. It might as well have been welded in place. I moved to the windows, tried to pry one open, to break the seal, to do anything that would give me a way out. The glass was cold under my fingers, slick with condensation, but it wouldn't move. wouldn't even rattle in its frame. The bus turned another corner. The buildings outside grew older, more decrepit. Some of them had collapsed entirely, leaving gaps in the streetscape like missing teeth. The rain fell through the holes in their roofs, pooling in the rubble below. I walked toward the front of the bus. The other passengers didn't react as I passed them, didn't look up, didn't shift in their seats. Up close, they looked even less alive than I'd thought. Their skin had a waxy quality, their eyes fixed on points in the middle distance. The woman with the headphones wasn't listening to anything. When I glanced at her phone, the screen was black. Dead. Maybe it had always been dead. The driver watched me approach in the rearview mirror. That smile was still there, small and knowing. "Let me off," I said. I tried to keep my voice steady, failed. "Whatever this is, I want off, right now." "There's a stop coming up," she said, same flat tone as before. "You can get off there." "Where? Where is this? What route is this?" She didn't answer, just kept driving, that smile never wavering. The bus slowed. Through the rain-streaked windshield, I saw a stop ahead, a shelter just like the one I'd boarded at, same cracked plastic bench, same faded schedule board. But the street around it was wrong. The buildings, the signs, the very texture of the pavement, all of it was from another time, another place, a city that shouldn't exist. The doors hissed open. "Your stop," the driver said. I didn't move, looked out at the dark street, the falling rain, the empty sidewalks. Getting off felt like stepping into a void, but staying on the bus felt worse. If I get off, can I get back on? Take the route back to where I started? The driver's smile widened. Just slightly. Just enough. The 56 doesn't go back. It only goes forward. I stepped off the bus. The doors closed behind me immediately. The bus pulled away, its taillights disappearing into the rain, and I was alone on a street I'd never seen in a city that couldn't be real. The shelter offered some protection from the downpour. I huddled under its roof, trying to get my bearings, trying to make sense of what had happened. My phone still showed no signal. The screen glowed uselessly in my hand, a rectangle of light that connected me to nothing. The street was deserted. No cars, no pedestrians, no signs of life at all. The buildings around me were dark, their windows either boarded over or broken. Somewhere in the distance, I heard something that might have been thunder, or might have been something else entirely. I started walking. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I couldn't stay at that bus stop, waiting for another bus that might never come, or might come all too soon. I walked in the direction the bus had been heading, figuring that if there was a route, there had to be an end point, a terminal. Somewhere the line stopped. The rain soaked through my jacket within minutes. Cold seeped into my bones, made my fingers numb, my thoughts sluggish. The street stretched ahead of me, endless and empty, lined with buildings that seemed to lean inward as I passed, watching me, waiting. I walked for what felt like hours. The street never ended, never changed. Just the same decrepit buildings, the same broken windows, the same darkness pressing in from all sides. I passed the same church with the collapsed steeple 3 times, the same row of storefronts with unreadable names, the same gaps where buildings had crumbled into ruin. The city was a loop, a circle with no exit. I stopped walking, stood in the rain, breathing hard, fighting the panic that clawed at my chest. That's when I heard the bus. The engine sound was unmistakable. That low diesel rumble, the squeak of brakes, the hiss of hydraulics. I turned around and saw headlights cutting through the darkness. A bus approaching from the direction I'd come. Route 56. It pulled up to the stop I'd been walking away from. The doors opened. The same driver looked out at me, same gray hair, same knowing smile. "Changed your mind?" she asked. I didn't answer. I just stood there in the rain, staring at the bus that had somehow circled back. that had somehow found me in this impossible city. "The 56 always comes back," she said. "It's very reliable that way. Every 20 minutes, rain or shine." "Where does it go? Where does this route actually lead?" "Forward," she said again. "Always forward, never back." I had a choice. Stay in this empty loop of a city, walking streets that led nowhere, or get back on the bus and see where it took me. Neither option felt like escape. Both felt like different kinds of trap. But the bus was warm. The bus was moving, and somewhere, somehow, it had to end up somewhere. I got back on. The passengers had changed. The old man was gone. The woman with the headphones was gone. The two teenagers in the back were gone. In their places sat different figures. A businessman in a suit that looked decades out of style. A child clutching a stuffed animal with button eyes. An elderly woman knitting something shapeless and gray. None of them looked at me. None of them breathed. I sat down in a different seat this time, closer to the front where I could watch the driver. She hadn't acknowledged the change in passengers, hadn't seemed to notice that her bus had emptied and refilled in the minutes I'd been gone. "Where did the other people go?" I asked. "They got off at their stops." There was only one stop, the one I got off at. She didn't respond. The bus turned a corner, and the scenery shifted again. We were leaving the decrepit neighborhood behind, moving into somewhere new. The buildings here were taller, sleeker, made of glass and steel that reflected the rain in fractured patterns, but they were just as empty as the others, just as dark. "How long is this route?" I tried. "As long as it needs to be." "That's not an answer." "It's the only one I have." I leaned forward, trying to see her face more clearly. In the driver's mirror, her reflection looked strange, blurred somehow, like a photograph that hadn't developed properly. "Who are you? What is this?" For the first time, she seemed to consider the question. The bus stopped at a red light, the first traffic signal I'd seen since boarding, and she turned slightly, looking at me over her shoulder. In that angle, her face was different, older, hollow. The skin stretched too tight over bones that seemed too sharp. "I'm the driver," she said. "I've always been the driver." "That's not what I asked." "It's what you need to know." The light changed. She turned back to the road. "Everyone asks questions when they first get on. Who are you? What is this? Where am I going? But the answers don't help. They never help." "Try me." She was silent for a long moment. The bus passed through an intersection, and I caught a glimpse of something in the cross street. Movement, shapes, figures walking in the rain. Other people, living people maybe. I lurched toward the window, tried to see more, but the bus had already passed. The street behind us was empty again. "The 56 runs between the cracks," the driver said finally. "The places the map doesn't show. The routes that were planned but never built. The stops that were abandoned. The streets that used to exist before the city changed." That doesn't make sense. Doesn't have to make sense. It just has to be true. I thought about the schedule board at my stop, the one that hadn't been updated in years. I thought about the old buildings we'd passed, the architectural styles that belonged to different decades. I thought about the passengers who sat frozen in their seats, neither alive nor dead. The people on the bus, are they real? They were, once. She paused. They got on, just like you. Took the 56 without knowing where it went. Some of them found their stop. Most of them didn't. "What happens if you don't find your stop?" The driver smiled again, that same small, knowing expression that made my skin crawl. "You stay on the route. You become part of it, a passenger forever, riding between the cracks, waiting for a stop that never comes." The businessman in the outdated suit, the child with the button-eyed bear, the elderly woman knitting endlessly. They weren't passengers, they were prisoners. "How do I find my stop?" My voice came out smaller than I intended. "How do I get off this thing?" You have to recognize it when you see it. Your stop is personal. It's the place you're supposed to be, not where you want to go, not where you think you should go, where you belong. And if I don't recognize it? She shrugged. Then you ride forever, like them. I looked at the other passengers, studied their frozen faces, their empty eyes, wondered how long they'd been riding, wondered if they'd ever had a chance at all. The route loops, I said slowly. I got off, and I ended up right back where I started. How is that giving me a chance? The route loops if you're not ready, if you haven't accepted where you need to be. She made another turn, and the scenery changed again. Residential now. Houses instead of buildings, lawns and trees, and the soft glow of porch lights. But when your stop comes, you'll know. You'll feel it. How? You'll want to get off more than you've ever wanted anything, and the door will open. I looked out the window at the houses passing by. They looked normal, ordinary, the kind of neighborhood I might have grown up in, might have walked through 1,000 times without thinking. But none of them felt like home. None of them called to me. What if I never feel it? I asked. What if I ride forever just because I don't know where I belong? The driver didn't answer. And somewhere in the back of the bus, the child with the button-eyed bear began to cry. The sound was wrong. Not the crying of a living child, too hollow, too mechanical, like a recording played through broken speakers. But it went on and on, a thin wail that cut through the rumble of the engine and the patter of rain against the windows. I turned in my seat and looked back. The child was still frozen in place, hadn't moved, hadn't changed position, but the mouth was open now, and that sound was pouring out of it, an endless loop of grief that seemed to fill the entire bus. The other passengers began to stir. The businessman's head rotated slowly, mechanically, until he was facing me. The elderly woman's knitting needles began to click, faster and faster, her hands moving in a blur even though her face remained blank and still. And the child kept crying, that awful recorded wail that wouldn't stop. "What's happening?" I shouted toward the driver. "What's wrong with them?" "They're waking up." Her voice was calm, unbothered. It happens sometimes when someone new gets on. They remember what it felt like to be alive. They remember what it felt like to want something. "Make it stop." "I can't. They have to run down on their own." The businessman stood up. His movements were jerky, uncoordinated, like a marionette operated by someone who'd never seen a human walk. He took a step toward me, then another. His mouth opened, and a voice came out. Not his voice, something older, something that had been waiting a long time to speak. "Where is your stop?" I pressed myself back in my seat. "I don't know." "Where is your stop?" The same words, the same flat tone. He took another step. "Where is your stop? Where is your stop?" The elderly woman joined in. The child's crying shifted, became words, the same words, repeated in a chorus that echoed off the walls of the bus. "Where is your stop? Where is your stop? Where is your stop?" I ran, pushed past the businessman, dodged the elderly woman's grasping hands, stumbled toward the front of the bus. The driver didn't react as I collapsed into the seat directly behind her, pressing myself against the window, as far from the other passengers as I could get. They didn't follow. They stood in the aisle swaying with the motion of the bus, their mouths moving in unison. "Where is your stop? Where is your stop?" "I don't know." I screamed it, the words tearing out of my throat. "I don't know where I belong. I've never known." The chanting stopped. Silence fell, sudden and complete. The passengers froze mid-word, mid-gesture. The child's mouth closed. The knitting needles went still. The driver looked at me in the rearview mirror. "That's the problem, isn't it?" she said. It wasn't a question. "That's why you got on the 56 in the first place. You were already lost. You were lost before you ever saw this bus." I didn't answer. Couldn't answer, because she was right. I'd been wandering for years, changing majors, changing apartments, changing friend groups, never committing to anything because nothing ever felt right, never putting down roots because I didn't know where roots were supposed to go. I'd spent my whole life waiting to feel like I belonged somewhere, and the feeling never came. And now I was on a bus that went nowhere, surrounded by passengers who'd made the same mistake. How do I find it? My voice was barely a whisper. How do I figure out where I'm supposed to be? You don't figure it out. The driver made a turn, and the neighborhood outside changed again. Apartment buildings now, tall and gray, windows lit with the warm glow of lives being lived inside. You feel it. You stop thinking, and you let yourself feel. I don't know how to do that. Then you learn, or you ride forever. She shrugged. Those are the only options on the 56. The bus continued through the rain. The frozen passengers behind me slowly returned to their seats, settling back into their eternal stillness. I watched the buildings pass, the lit windows, the glimpses of normalcy that seemed impossibly far away. And I tried to feel. I thought about my childhood home, the apartment where my mother had raised me alone. But that wasn't it. That was her home, not mine. I thought about my college dorm, the cramped room I'd shared with a stranger who became a friend. But that wasn't it either. That was temporary, transitional, a place to sleep between classes. I thought about every place I'd ever lived, every neighborhood I'd walked through, every city I'd considered moving to. None of them called to me. None of them felt like anything but locations on a map. Then the bus turned a corner, and I saw it. A coffee shop. Small, wedged between a laundromat and a bookstore. Its windows steamed from the warmth inside. I'd never been there before. I didn't recognize the street, or the neighborhood, or anything around it. But I knew it. I knew it the way you know your own heartbeat. "Stop," I said. "Stop the bus." The driver smiled. "Are you sure?" "Yes, this is it. This is my stop." The bus slowed, pulled to the curb. The doors hissed open, and I could smell it. Coffee and old books and rain-soaked pavement, the scent of somewhere I'd never been but had always been looking for. I stood up, walked toward the door. "One more thing," the driver said. I paused at the threshold. "Once you get off, you can't get back on. The 56 only picks you up once. Whatever you find out there, you have to live with it." I looked at the coffee shop, at the warm light spilling through its windows, at the life I'd somehow recognized without ever having lived it. "That's okay," I said. "I think I'm ready to stop riding." I stepped off the bus. The rain stopped the moment my feet hit the pavement. Not gradually, instantly, like someone had turned off a faucet. The clouds didn't part, the sky didn't clear. It just stopped raining, and the world went still around me. I turned to look at the bus. It was already pulling away, taillights glowing red in the darkness. Through the rear window, I could see the passengers, still frozen, still waiting, still trapped on a route that went nowhere. And standing in the aisle, facing me, was the child with the button-eyed bear. She waved, not the mechanical, jerky movement I'd seen before. A real wave, small and sad. And then the bus turned a corner and was gone, disappearing into a city that probably didn't exist anymore. I stood on the sidewalk for a long time, just breathing. The air smelled different here, cleaner, sharper, more real. The streetlights hummed with electricity. Somewhere in the distance, a car horn honked. Normal sounds, living sounds. I walked to the coffee shop. The door chimed when I opened it. Inside was exactly what I'd seen through the window. Worn wooden tables, mismatched chairs, a counter with a display case of pastries that looked homemade. A handful of customers sat scattered around the room, reading books, working on laptops, existing in the easy comfort of a familiar place. "Help you?" The barista was young, maybe my age, with ink-stained fingers and a tired smile. She looked at me like I was any other customer, not like I'd just stepped off a bus from nowhere. "Coffee," I said. "Just coffee." She poured me a cup. I paid with cash, real cash, from my real wallet, currency that was actually worth something in a world that actually existed. I took my drink to a table by the window and sat down. Outside, the street was quiet, normal. A few cars passed, their headlights sweeping across the wet pavement. A couple walked by under a shared umbrella, laughing at something I couldn't hear. The city went on, oblivious to the roots that ran between its cracks. I drank my coffee, let the warmth spread through me. And for the first time in as long as I could remember, I didn't feel lost. I stayed at that coffee shop until closing, talked to the barista. Her name was Jenna. She was a graduate student in anthropology. She worked nights because she liked the quiet. Talked to the owner when he came by to check on things, a retired librarian named Howard who'd opened the shop because he missed having a place where people gathered. When they finally kicked me out at midnight, I walked until I found a motel, paid for a room, slept better than I had in years. The next morning, I went back to the coffee shop, and the morning after that, and the one after that. It's been 3 months now. I found an apartment 2 blocks away, a small studio above a used bookstore, the kind of place I would have dismissed as too cramped, too old, too impractical before. Now it feels like exactly the right size. I found a job at the bookstore itself, shelving inventory and helping customers and learning the particular joy of recommending a book to someone and watching their face light up. I don't know if this is where I was always supposed to end up. I don't know if the bus somehow brought me to my destiny, or if I just finally stopped running long enough to let a random place become home. But I belong here. For the first time in my life, I actually belong somewhere. Sometimes, late at night, I hear buses pass on the street outside my window. I always listen for the engine sound, the particular rumble of that old diesel motor. I never hear it, but I wonder about the other passengers, the businessman, the elderly woman, the crying child. I wonder if they're still riding, still waiting for stops that might never come. And I wonder about the people who get on the 56 without knowing what it is. The lost ones, the wanderers, the people who spend their whole lives looking for something they can't name. They board a bus that doesn't exist, on a route that isn't on any map, and they ride into the space between places. Some of them find their stop, some of them don't. I was lucky. That's what I tell myself. I was lucky and I got off. And now I have a life that actually feels like mine. But every now and then, when I'm working the late shift at the bookstore or walking home through empty streets, I catch myself looking for that bus, watching for its headlights to appear from the wrong direction, because the driver said the 56 only picks you up once. And sometimes I wonder what happens if you start feeling lost again. If the route between the cracks is always there, waiting. If the bus comes back for the ones who couldn't stay found. Story 4, the cleaning crew that only signed in once. The sign-in log was my responsibility. That's one of the first things they tell you when you start working night security at a place like Ashworth Tower. Everyone signs in, everyone signs out. Doesn't matter if you're a CEO working late or a delivery driver dropping off packages. You write your name, you write the time, you write your purpose, and when you leave, you do it all again. The building's insurance required it. Liability, they said. In case something happens, we need to know who was inside. I'd been on the job for about 6 weeks when I noticed the anomaly. It was a Wednesday night, quiet like they all were. Ashworth Tower was a 32-story office building in the financial district, home to law firms and accounting practices, and the kind of businesses that worked 9 to 5 and not a minute longer. By 8 p.m., the place was a ghost town. By 10, when my shift started, I was usually the only living soul in the building. I was flipping through the sign-in log, something I did every night, more out of boredom than duty, when I saw the entry. October 3rd. 5 names, written in different handwriting but clearly together. R. Delgado, M. Huang, T. Okonkwo, P. Vasquez, J. Morrison. Time in 9:47 p.m. Purpose, cleaning crew, Night Bright Services. I looked at the sign-out column. Blank. All 5 of them. No time, no signature, nothing. I flipped forward through the pages, thinking maybe they'd signed out on the wrong date by mistake. People did that sometimes, got confused, wrote in the wrong spot. But there was nothing. October 4th, 5th, 6th, all the way up to today, October 24th. The Night Bright crew had signed in 3 weeks ago and never signed out. I mentioned it to Reggie the next morning during shift change. He'd been working at Ashworth for almost 8 years, knew everything about the building, every quirk and shortcut and unwritten rule. The cleaning crew, I said, showing him the log. They never signed out. Look, October 3rd. It's been 3 weeks. Reggie glanced at the page. Something flickered across his face, there and gone. He closed the log and slid it back across the desk. Don't worry about it, he said. But they never... I said don't worry about it. His voice was sharper than I'd ever heard it. He grabbed his jacket, his keys, his thermos, paused at the door. Just do your rounds. Keep your head down. The building takes care of itself. He left before I could ask what that meant. That night, I did my first round at 11 p.m. standard procedure. Walk every floor, check every stairwell, make sure all the doors were locked and no one was hiding in a bathroom or sleeping under a desk. The building was quiet, the way it always was. Just the hum of the HVAC system and the soft buzz of exit signs and the echo of my footsteps on marble floors. I was on the 17th floor when I heard it, a vacuum cleaner. Somewhere above me, the unmistakable drone of a commercial vacuum moving across carpet. I stopped walking, tilted my head, listened. The sound was distant but clear, filtering down through the ceiling, through the floors that separated us. The cleaning crew was working, but that didn't make sense. They'd signed in 3 weeks ago and never signed out. They weren't supposed to be here. And even if they were, even if some new crew had started, they would have signed in at my desk. I would have seen them. I took the stairs to 18, stepped out into the hallway, flashlight in hand, even though the emergency lighting kept everything dimly visible. The vacuuming had stopped. I walked the floor slowly, checking each office suite, each conference room, each corner where someone might be working. Nothing. No vacuum, no cleaner, no sign that anyone had been there at all. Except the trash cans were empty. I noticed it in the 3rd office I checked. A wastebasket that should have had at least a day's worth of garbage was completely clean. Fresh liner, neatly tucked. I checked the next office, and the next. All of them. Empty. Clean. Someone had been here. Someone had taken out the trash, replaced the bags, done the work. But there was no one here now. I finished my round with a crawling feeling at the back of my neck. Wrote up my report like everything was normal because I didn't know how to describe what wasn't. Sat at my desk in the lobby and stared at the sign-in log, at those 5 names that had never signed out, and tried to convince myself there was an explanation. The next night, I heard them again. This time, it was a floor buffer. That rhythmic whirring hum, the squeak of pads against tile. It was coming from the 23rd floor, I was almost certain. I took the elevator up, walked the halls, found nothing, but the floors were gleaming, freshly polished, still slightly damp. I could see my reflection in them. I found a mop and bucket in the stairwell between 23 and 24. The mop was wet. The water in the bucket was gray with use. I stood there staring at it, listening to the silence of the empty building, waiting for something to make sense. Nothing did. The mop and bucket hadn't been there when I'd climbed the stairs 10 minutes ago. Someone had left them. Someone had been using them. Someone was still here. I called out. My voice echoed off the concrete walls, the metal railings, the endless flights of stairs stretching up and down into darkness. No one answered. But somewhere far above me, so faint I might have imagined it, I heard a door click shut. I started keeping my own records after that. Every night, I'd note the time when I heard them. The floor, the sound, how long it lasted. Vacuuming on 18, 11:47 p.m. to 12:03 a.m. Floor buffer on 23, 1:15 a.m. to 1:22 a.m. What sounded like furniture being moved on 29, 2:41 a.m. to 2:58 a.m. I filled pages with observations, trying to find a pattern, trying to make sense of what I was experiencing. The sounds always came from above me, never the floor I was on, never below. And by the time I reached the source, they'd always stopped. The work would be done, trash emptied, floors polished, windows cleaned, but the workers themselves had vanished. I tried to catch them, waited in stairwells, rode the elevator to random floors without warning, stood in the darkness of empty offices, listening, watching. I never saw anyone, never caught so much as a shadow moving in my peripheral vision, but the signs of their presence were everywhere. Fresh vacuum tracks and carpet that had been flat an hour before. The sharp scent of cleaning solution in bathrooms I knew hadn't been touched when I'd checked them on my previous round. Paper towel dispensers refilled, soap dispensers topped off. The 1,000 small tasks that kept a building running, done by hands I couldn't see. I tried talking to Reggie again, cornered him at shift change, demanded answers. Who's doing the cleaning? There's no crew signed in. There hasn't been anyone signed in since October 3rd, but someone is working up there every night. I hear them. I see the evidence. Who are they? Reggie wouldn't look at me. He kept his eyes on his coffee, on the floor, on anything but my face. The building has a contract with Nightbright, he said finally. Has for years. They come, they clean, they go. They don't go. That's the point. They signed in 3 weeks ago and never left. Maybe they use a different exit, service entrance, loading dock. All the exits logged through security. You know that. Nothing's been opened after hours except the front door. Reggie was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was barely above a whisper. There was an accident. Years ago, before I started. A fire in one of the upper floors. The night crew was up there when it happened. He finally looked at me, and I saw something in his eyes I hadn't expected. Fear. They never made it out. My stomach dropped. What are you saying? I'm saying the building has a cleaning contract that never gets renewed because it never expires. I'm saying Nightbright went out of business in 2008, but someone's still doing the work. He grabbed his jacket and headed for the door. I'm saying don't go looking for answers you don't want to find. He left me standing in the lobby, the weight of what he'd said pressing down on me like something physical. That night, I looked up the fire. It took hours of searching through old news archives, microfiche records, anything I could find. But eventually, I found it. A small article in the city paper from November 2007. Office fire claims 5. A blaze on the 31st floor of Ashworth Tower, cause undetermined, broke out around 2 a.m. 5 members of a contracted cleaning crew were trapped when the stairwell became impassable. By the time firefighters reached them, it was too late. The article listed their names: R. Delgado, M. Juan, T. Okonkwo, P. Vasquez, J. Morrison. The same 5 names in the sign-in log. The same 5 people who'd walked into Ashworth Tower on October 3rd, 2007, 17 years ago, and never walked out. I sat at my desk, staring at the article on my phone, trying to process what I was reading. The sign-in log was right there in front of me, those names written in fresh ink on a page dated 3 weeks ago. But according to this, They'd been dead for almost 2 decades. Someone was playing a joke on me. That had to be it. Reggie, maybe, hazing the new guy with a ghost story. Someone had written those names in the log to mess with my head, and now I was falling for it. But the vacuum sounds were real. The fresh trash bags were real. The gleaming floors and the full soap dispensers and the mop bucket in the stairwell, all of it was real. I did my 2 a.m. round that night with my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my temples. I walked every floor, checked every corner, jumped at every shadow. The building was silent. No vacuuming, no buffing, no sounds of work being done. Just the hum of the HVAC and the soft buzz of the exit signs and the rasp of my own breathing. I made it to the 31st floor at 2:23 a.m. The elevator doors opened onto darkness. The emergency lights were out, burned out or broken, I couldn't tell. My flashlight cut a narrow beam through the black, illuminating a floor that looked different from the others. Older. The carpet was a pattern I hadn't seen anywhere else in the building. The walls were painted a color that seemed to belong to another decade, and there was a smell, faint but unmistakable, underneath the usual building odors. Smoke, old smoke, the kind that seeps into walls and never quite leaves. I walked forward. The flashlight beam trembled. My hands were shaking and I couldn't make them stop. I passed an office door, then another. All of them closed, all of them dark. Then I heard it. A voice, distant, muffled, coming from somewhere deeper in the floor. I couldn't make out words, just the rhythm of speech. Someone talking, someone working. I followed the sound, walked past more doors, more darkness. The smell of smoke grew stronger. The air felt thicker, harder to breathe, like I was walking into a memory of heat and flame. The voice resolved into something clearer, someone singing. A low, tuneless hum, the kind of thing you do without thinking when you're focused on a task. I turned a corner and saw light spilling from an open doorway at the end of the hall. Real light, warm and yellow. The light of an office that was occupied, that was being used, that had someone inside. I walked toward it. I don't know why. Every instinct screamed at me to turn around, to take the stairs, to get out of the building and never come back. But my feet kept moving, carrying me toward that doorway, toward the singing, toward whatever was waiting for me on the other side. I reached the threshold, looked inside, and they looked back, 5 of them. Sitting in office chairs arranged in a loose circle, like they'd been taking a break. Uniforms I didn't recognize. Powder blue shirts with a logo that might have been Night Bright, dark pants, work boots. They had coffee cups and brown paper bags, the remnants of a meal spread out on a desk they'd pulled into the center of the room. They were looking at me. All 5 of them, heads turned toward the doorway, faces caught in expressions of mild surprise. Like I'd walked in on something private. Like I was the one who didn't belong. Sorry, I heard myself say. The word came out automatically, the reflex of a lifetime of social conditioning. I didn't mean to. I stopped, because I'd finally looked at their faces, really looked. The skin was wrong, mottled, discolored, stretched too tight in some places and hanging loose in others. One of them, a woman, maybe M. Huang based on the name stitched on her shirt, had burns covering the left side of her face. The flesh was melted, fused, one eye socket empty and dark. The man beside her, T. Okonkwo, had no lips, just teeth, exposed and yellowed, set in a permanent grimace that might have been a smile. They were dead, clearly, obviously dead, but they were sitting there, looking at me, waiting for me to finish my sentence. I didn't mean to interrupt, I whispered. R. Delgado. I assumed that's who he was, the one closest to me with a supervisor's badge clipped to his pocket, stood up slowly. His movements were stiff, mechanical, like his joints didn't work quite right anymore. When he spoke, his voice was a rasp, dry and crackling. like paper being crumpled. It's okay. We were just finishing up. I couldn't move. My legs had locked, my body refusing to respond to the screaming in my brain that said, "Run, run, get out, run." "You're the new night security," Delgado continued. He took a step toward me, and I saw that his hands were blackened, the fingers curled into claws. "We've seen you, walking the floors, checking the doors." Another step. "You're very thorough." "Thank you." Why was I thanking him? Why was I still standing here? I need to finish my rounds. Of course. He stopped, maybe 5 feet from me, close enough that I could smell him now. Smoke and something else, something sweet and rotten underneath. "We won't keep you. We have work to do anyway." The others were standing now too, gathering their supplies, a vacuum, a mop, a bucket, a cart loaded with cleaning materials, moving with that same stiff, wrong motion, like puppets being operated by someone who'd never seen how people actually moved. "Every night," Delgado said, "we clean every floor, take out the trash, mop the bathrooms, polish the floors. The building has to be ready for the morning. That's what they pay us for." I swallowed, tried again. "You signed in on October 3rd. You never signed out." Something flickered across his ruined face. Confusion, maybe, or memory. "We never leave," he said. "The building needs us. The building takes care of us. We take care of the building. But we're on the clock." His voice hardened. Not angry exactly, just final. "And so are you. You should finish your rounds. We'll stay out of your way." He turned away from me, gesturing to the others. They filed past me through the doorway, one by one, each of them carrying their equipment. I pressed myself against the wall to let them pass, my skin crawling every time one of them brushed close. They smelled like smoke and death and industrial cleaning solution, a combination that made my stomach lurch. The last one, Jay Morrison, a younger man with burns covering most of his visible skin, stopped beside me. "Don't come up here again," he said. His voice was softer than Delgado's, almost apologetic. "It's easier if you just let us work. The ones who come looking, it's harder for them." "Harder how?" He didn't answer, just followed the others into the darkness, their footsteps fading, the squeak of cartwheels growing distant. I stood alone in the empty office. The light was gone. Had there ever been light? The room was dark now, illuminated only by my flashlight. No chairs in a circle, no coffee cups, no remnants of a meal. Just dust and old furniture and the smell of smoke that never quite left. I ran. I don't remember the stairs, don't remember the elevator, don't remember any of the floors between 31 and the lobby. I just remember bursting through the stairwell door on the ground level, gasping for breath, my flashlight dead in my hand. The lobby was empty. The security desk sat there with its sign-in log, its monitors, its ordinary evidence of ordinary life. Rain had started outside. I could hear it against the windows, steady and rhythmic. The building hummed around me, alive with the sound of systems running, machines operating, everything exactly as it should be. I sat at the desk, tried to breathe, tried to convince myself I'd imagined it, hallucinated it, fallen asleep standing up and dreamed the whole thing. Then I looked at the monitors. Camera 31, the feed from the top floor, was dark. All the other cameras showed empty hallways, empty offices, the boring stillness of a building after hours. But 31 was just static, a gray screen of nothing. As I watched, shapes moved in the static. Dark shapes, barely visible, pushing carts and carrying equipment. Working. Always working. The camera flickered. For just a second, the static cleared, and I saw them. All five, standing in the hallway of the 31st floor, looking directly at the camera. Looking at me, then the feed went dark, and they were gone. I tried to quit the next morning. Walked into the building manager's office at 7 a.m. before anyone else had arrived, and told him I was done. Family emergency, I said. Had to leave the city, couldn't work my notice period. I was sorry for the inconvenience, but I needed to go. He looked at me with an expression I couldn't read. Sympathy, maybe, or pity. He was an older man named Hargrove, had been managing Ashworth Tower for almost 15 years. He'd seen security guards come and go. You went to 31, he said. Not a question. I didn't answer, didn't need to. They always do, eventually, the curious ones. He leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled under his chin. How much did they tell you? They said... I stopped, tried again. They said not to come back up there. They said it was harder for the ones who came looking. Hargrove nodded slowly. That's true. It is harder. Once they notice you, once they know you can see them. The building doesn't like to let go. What does that mean? It means you can quit if you want. You can walk out that door and never come back. But they'll follow you. He said it matter-of-factly, like he was explaining a policy about parking validation. Not physically. They can't leave the building, but you'll hear them. At night, when you're trying to sleep. The vacuum, the buffer, the sounds of work being done. You'll smell the smoke. You'll see them in reflections, in windows, in the dark corners of whatever room you're in. My hands were shaking. I shoved them in my pockets so he wouldn't see. For how long? Forever, as far as I know. The last guard who quit after seeing them, this was about 6 years ago. He called me after 3 months, begging to come back. Said he hadn't slept in weeks. Said they were in his apartment every night, cleaning, working, never stopping. Said he could hear them whispering about him while they worked. What happened to him? Hargrove's expression didn't change. He came back, worked here for another 2 years. Then one night, he went up to 31 and never came down. The words hung in the air between us. Rain had started outside. I could hear it against the windows, that steady rhythm that usually felt soothing. Now it just sounded like static, like interference. So my choices are, stay or go insane. Your choices are stay and learn to live with it, or leave and let it consume you. He shrugged. Most people choose to stay. The building provides good salary, good benefits, and the crew, they're not malicious. They're just trapped. They just want to do their jobs. They're dead. They've been dead for 17 years. They're working. There's a difference. He stood up, signaling that our conversation was over. Take the day to think about it. But if you're not back for your shift tonight, don't expect the sounds to stop. Don't expect to ever feel alone again. I left his office, walked out of the building into the rain, stood on the sidewalk for a long time, letting the water soak through my clothes, trying to convince myself I had options. I didn't go home. I couldn't face my apartment, couldn't stand the thought of sitting in silence waiting to hear a vacuum that shouldn't exist. Instead, I went to the library, researched Ashworth Tower, its history, anything I could find about the fire and the crew, and what had happened on the 31st floor. The fire had started at 2:17 a.m. on November 3rd, 2007. Electrical failure, according to the official report. A fault in the wiring that sparked in a storage closet full of cleaning supplies. The flames spread fast, too fast, fed by the chemicals and paper products stored inside. By the time the fire department arrived, the entire floor was engulfed. The cleaning crew had been trapped. The stairwell doors had malfunctioned, locked automatically when the fire alarm triggered, a safety feature that was supposed to contain the blaze but instead sealed the workers inside. They'd tried the roof access, but that door was locked too. They'd tried to break windows, but the glass was reinforced, designed to withstand impacts. They'd died together, in an office at the far end of the floor, huddled against a wall while the fire consumed everything around them. The building had been repaired. The 31st floor had been gutted and rebuilt, the walls replaced, the wiring updated, every trace of the fire erased. It had reopened 6 months later, fully leased, fully operational. Business as usual. But the crew had never left. They'd signed in on October 3rd, a month before the fire, and they'd never signed out. And every night since, for 17 years, they'd been working, cleaning floors that didn't need cleaning, emptying trash cans that would be full again by morning, doing their jobs over and over because no one had ever told them they could stop. I found one more article buried deep in the archives, an interview with a fire investigator who'd worked the Ashworth case. He'd been asked about the locked doors, the malfunctioning safety systems, the terrible coincidence that had trapped 5 people in a burning building. It wasn't coincidence, he'd said. Someone tampered with those doors. Someone wanted them to stay locked. The interviewer had asked who. The investigator had refused to answer, but there was a note at the bottom of the article, added by an editor. 6 months after this interview, the investigator died in a house fire. Cause, electrical failure. I put down my phone, sat in the library, surrounded by ordinary people living ordinary lives, and felt the weight of what I'd uncovered pressing down on my chest. Someone had killed the cleaning crew, someone had made sure they couldn't escape, and now they were trapped in the building forever, working endless shifts, bound to a job they could never clock out of, and the building, or someone in it, had been covering it up ever since. My phone buzzed, a text from a number I didn't recognize. "You should come back tonight. We need to talk." I stared at the message, typed a response. "Who is this?" The reply came immediately. R. Delgado. Floor 31. We know who locked the doors. My hands were shaking so badly, I almost dropped the phone. Another message appeared. We know who killed us, and he's still here. I went back that night. I don't know if it was courage or stupidity or just the desperate need to understand. But at 10 p.m., I walked through the front doors of Ashworth Tower, signed in at the security desk, and took the elevator to the 31st floor. The doors opened onto darkness, same as before. Emergency lights dead, the smell of old smoke hanging in the air. But this time I wasn't surprised. This time, I walked forward into the black with my flashlight raised, following the faint sounds of movement deeper into the floor. I found them in the same office, the 5 of them gathered in that loose circle waiting for me. Their ruined faces turned toward the doorway as I approached, and Delgado rose to meet me. "You came back," he said. "Good. We don't have much time." "Time for what?" "To show you." He gestured toward the others, and they parted, revealing something on the floor behind them. A hatch, maybe 2 feet square, set into the concrete. I'd never seen it before, hadn't known it existed. "The building has secrets," Delgado said. "Passages that aren't on any blueprint, rooms that don't officially exist. We found them after the fire, when we realized we couldn't leave." He knelt beside the hatch, his blackened fingers curling around the handle. "This one leads to the sub-basement, to a room that's been locked since 2007. "What's in it?" "Proof." He pulled the hatch open. A ladder descended into darkness below. Proof of who we were. Proof of what we saw. Proof of why we had to die. I looked at the hole in the floor, at the ladder disappearing into nothing. Every instinct screamed at me to leave, to run, to forget everything I'd learned and never come back. But I thought about those 5 people, trapped in this building for 17 years, doing the same jobs over and over while their killer walked free. I thought about the fire investigator who'd gotten too close to the truth. I thought about all the security guards who'd come before me, who'd seen too much and paid the price. I climbed down the ladder. The room at the bottom was small, maybe 10 feet square, with concrete walls and a single bare bulb hanging from the ceiling. Filing cabinets lined one wall. A desk sat in the corner, covered in dust, with a computer that looked like it hadn't been turned on in decades. Delgado climbed down behind me, his movements stiff and wrong in that small space. "We were working late," he said. "October 3rd, 2007. We'd been asked to clean this floor, 31, even though it wasn't on our usual rotation. Special request from building management. We thought it was strange, but we needed the overtime." He crossed to one of the filing cabinets, pulled it open with a screech of rusted metal. "We found these, hidden in a wall panel we were supposed to clean behind." He pulled out a folder, thick with documents, and handed it to me. Financial records, embezzlement, millions of dollars siphoned from the building's operating budget over almost a decade, and the name of the person responsible. I opened the folder, scanned the pages, the columns of numbers, the signatures at the bottom of each form. Hargrove, Gerald Hargrove, building manager. He was skimming from maintenance budgets, insurance payments, tenant fees, hiding it in shell companies, fake invoices, contracts that didn't exist. Delgado's voice was flat, reciting facts he'd had 17 years to memorize. "We found the evidence. We were going to report it, and he found out. So he killed you, locked the doors, started the fire, made it look like an accident. He was thorough, destroyed most of the evidence afterward, but he didn't know about this room. Didn't know we'd hidden copies down here before the fire." Delgado looked at me with those burned, hollow eyes. "We've been waiting for someone to find it, to bring it to light. But the building protects him. The building keeps his secrets." "Why? Why would the building?" "Because he feeds it." The voice came from behind me. I spun around, flashlight swinging. Hargrove stood at the base of the ladder. He looked different in the dim light, older, harder, his face set in an expression I'd never seen before. In his hand was a canister, red and industrial. I recognized it from the cleaning carts. Chemical accelerant, the same thing that had made the fire spread so fast 17 years ago. "The building and I have an arrangement," he said, stepping forward. "I give it workers who never leave, never complain, never demand raises, and it gives me protection, cover, a place where the rules don't apply." "You're insane." "I'm practical." He smiled, and there was nothing human in it. "You're not the first guard to figure it out. You won't be the last. But you will join the crew, just like the others." He raised the canister. I saw his thumb move toward the igniter. The lights went out. In the darkness, I heard movement. Fast, wrong movement. The stiff shuffle of bodies that didn't work quite right, but were moving with terrible purpose. Hargrove screamed, a sound of genuine terror, and I heard something heavy hit the floor, the canister, knocked from his hands, liquid splashing against concrete. Then Delgado's voice, right beside my ear. "Run! Up the ladder! Now!" I ran, climbed blind, hands gripping rungs I couldn't see, pulling myself up through the hatch and into the office above. Behind me, from the room below, I heard sounds I don't want to describe. Sounds of struggle, sounds of something being dragged, sounds that stopped very suddenly. I made it to the stairwell, made it to the lobby, made it outside into the rain, gasping, shaking, the folder of evidence still clutched in my hands. I went to the police, gave them everything, watched them search the building, watched them find the sub-basement room, watched them confirm what I already knew. Hargrove was gone. No body, no trace. Just an empty room with chemical stains on the floor and a hatch that didn't appear on any blueprint. The case is still open. 17-year-old murders, an embezzlement scheme worth millions, a building manager who vanished without a trace. The police don't have answers. I'm not sure they ever will. I don't work at Ashworth Tower anymore. I don't work security at all. I moved across the country, got a job in daylight, tried to build a life that didn't involve empty buildings and the smell of smoke. But sometimes, late at night, I hear them. The vacuum, the buffer, the squeak of cartwheels on tile. They're still working. They'll always be working. But the crew is bigger now, 6 members instead of 5. Hargrove found out what happens when you become part of the building, when you join the workers who never signed out. And sometimes, if I listen closely, I can hear his voice among the others, weaker than theirs, smaller, begging for a break that will never come, pleading for a shift that will never end. The building takes care of its own, and it never, ever lets them go. Story 5. The Shadow. Outside my bedroom door that stayed for an hour. I've always slept with my door cracked open. It's a habit from childhood, one I never grew out of. Something about a fully closed door made me feel trapped, suffocated, like the room was shrinking around me in the dark. So I left it open, just a few inches, just enough to let the hallway light seep in and remind me that there was a world outside my bedroom, that I wasn't alone. That habit almost got me killed. I was 23, living alone for the first time in my life. A 1-bedroom apartment on the 4th floor of a building that had seen better decades. The kind of place where the radiators clanked like someone was trapped inside them, and the pipes groaned every time a neighbor flushed a toilet. But the rent was cheap, and the location was convenient, and I was too proud to admit that living alone terrified me. The first few months were fine. I got used to the sounds, learned which creaks were the building settling and which were my upstairs neighbor pacing at 3 a.m. I developed routines, check the locks before bed, leave a light on in the bathroom, keep my phone charging on the nightstand where I could reach it. The rituals of a person learning to feel safe in an unfamiliar space. Then March came, and with it, the shadow. I noticed it on a Tuesday night. I'd gone to bed around 11, read for a while, turned off my lamp around midnight. The apartment was quiet. Rain tapped against my window in that gentle, rhythmic way that usually helped me sleep. I was drifting off, half-conscious, when something made me open my eyes. The hallway light was on. I always left it on. Another childhood habit, another small comfort in the dark. Through the crack in my door, I could see the pale yellow glow, the slice of illuminated wall, the edge of the bathroom door frame across the hall. And something else, a shadow, dark and distinct against the light, falling across the strip of floor I could see through the gap. The shape of a person standing just outside my door. My first thought was that I was dreaming. That half-asleep state plays tricks on your perception, makes you see things that aren't there. I blinked, rubbed my eyes, looked again. The shadow was still there. I lay frozen, barely breathing, watching it, waiting for it to move, to shift, to reveal itself as a coat hanging on a hook or a trick of the light through the window. But it didn't move. It just stood there, perfectly still, the unmistakable silhouette of a human figure cast against my hallway floor. I checked my phone. 12:47 a.m. For the next several minutes, I tried to rationalize. The shadow had to be coming from somewhere, a streetlight hitting something at the right angle, a piece of furniture I'd forgotten about, some optical illusion created by the specific geometry of my apartment. I ran through possibilities, constructed explanations, did everything I could to avoid the obvious conclusion. Someone was standing outside my bedroom door. I didn't move, didn't call out, didn't reach for my phone to dial 911. I just lay there, paralyzed, watching that shadow through the crack in my door. Part of me was certain that if I moved, if I made any sound at all, whatever was out there would know I was awake, would know I could see it, and then it would come in. The minutes crawled by. 12:52, 12:58, 1:07. The shadow didn't move, didn't shift its weight, didn't turn its head, didn't do any of the small unconscious movements that living things make. It just stood there, patient and still, like it had all the time in the world, like it was waiting. At 1:23, I finally found the courage to reach for my phone. Moved my hand slowly, inch by inch, keeping my eyes locked on that shadow. My fingers closed around the device. I pulled it under the covers, turned down the brightness, and opened the camera app. I don't know what I was thinking. Documentation, maybe. Proof that I wasn't crazy, that there was actually something there. Or maybe I thought the light from the flash would scare it away, would reveal it to be nothing more than a coat or a shadow or my own terrified imagination. I aimed the phone at the crack in the door, pressed the button. The flash went off. In that split second of illumination, I saw the hallway clearly. The walls, the floor, the bathroom door. Empty. Completely empty. No figure, no intruder, nothing that could cast a shadow. But when the flash faded and darkness returned, the shadow was still there. I checked my phone, looked at the photo I'd taken. The hallway was empty in the image, bright and ordinary, and utterly devoid of anything threatening. I looked back at the door. The shadow hadn't moved. Whatever was casting it wasn't in the hallway, wasn't anywhere a camera could see, but it was there. I could see it with my own eyes, dark and solid against the light, and it was still waiting. I checked the time again. 1:34 a.m. The shadow stayed for another 13 minutes. I know because I watched the clock the entire time, counting the seconds, waiting for something to happen. At 1:47, with no warning and no transition, it was simply gone. One moment the shadow was there. The next, the hallway floor was empty, just light and carpet and nothing else. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. Sat up in bed with my lamp on, watching the door, waiting for the shadow to return. It didn't. By the time the sun came up, I'd almost convinced myself I'd imagined the whole thing. Almost. But when I finally got up, when I finally walked to my bedroom door and looked out into the hallway, I found something that made my stomach drop. Footprints. In the carpet just outside my door. 2 of them, pressed deep into the fibers, like someone had been standing there for a long time. Standing and waiting. The prints faced my bedroom, and they hadn't been there the night before. I tried to vacuum them away. It sounds stupid now, but in that moment, it felt like the only logical response. If I could erase the footprints, I could pretend they'd never been there. Could pretend the whole night had been a dream, a hallucination, a symptom of stress or exhaustion or too much caffeine before bed. The vacuum didn't work. The impressions were too deep, pressed into the carpet fibers like they'd been made by something impossibly heavy. I ran the machine over them again and again, but every time I pulled it away, the footprints remained. 2 dark ovals facing my bedroom door, permanent reminders of what had stood there in the night. I called my landlord that afternoon, told him there was something wrong with the carpet, asked if he could replace it. He said he'd send someone to look at it, but his tone made it clear he thought I was being difficult. First-time renters, his voice implied. Always finding problems that don't exist. The carpet guy came 3 days later. He looked at the impressions, poked at them, shrugged. Could be water damage, he said. Sometimes the padding underneath gets compressed and pushes up through the fibers. Creates these weird marks. From inside the apartment. Pipes run through the walls. Condensation, small leaks. Happens all the time in old buildings. He stood up, brushed off his knees. I can replace this section if you want, but it's probably just going to happen again. I told him to replace it. Watched him cut out the stained carpet, pull up the padding beneath, lay down new material. When he was done, the hallway looked normal again. Fresh and clean, no sign of what had been there before. That night, the shadow came back. I was ready this time, or thought I was. I'd moved my dresser in front of the bedroom door, blocking most of the gap. I'd left every light in the apartment on, flooding the place with brightness. I'd even set up my phone to record video propped on my nightstand and aimed at the door. None of it mattered. I woke at 1:15 a.m. to the sound of my radiator clanking. Nothing unusual. The building was old, the heating system temperamental. But when I opened my eyes, I saw it immediately. The shadow, falling across the sliver of floor still visible beneath my dresser, dark and solid and utterly still. I grabbed my phone, checked the video. It was recording, had been recording for hours. I watched the live feed, the image of my blocked door, the strip of carpet beneath the dresser. Nothing there. The camera showed an empty hallway, just light and carpet and wall. But when I looked with my own eyes, the shadow remained. This time, I watched it, forced myself to study it, to look for details I might have missed before. The shape was human, roughly 6 feet tall, broad shoulders, what might have been a head tilted slightly to one side. It didn't move, didn't breathe, didn't do anything except exist. And it was closer than last time. The shadow fell further into my room, stretching past the dresser, reaching toward my bed. I timed it again. The shadow appeared at 1:15 and stayed until 2:17, 62 minutes, longer than before. When it finally vanished, I shoved the dresser aside and checked the hallway. The new carpet was pristine, no footprints, no impressions. Whatever had been standing there hadn't left a physical mark this time. But something else had changed. The light in the hallway was off. I knew I'd left it on. I always left it on, had checked it 3 times before going to bed. But now the switch was flipped, the bulb dark, and the only illumination came from the bathroom light at the end of the hall. Something had turned it off. Something had been out there, close enough to reach the switch, while I lay in bed watching its shadow. I stopped sleeping after that, not deliberately, I just couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that shadow. Every time I started to drift off, I jerked awake, certain it was standing over me. I went 2 days without rest, then 3. My work suffered. My concentration shattered. I walked through my life like a ghost, exhausted and terrified and utterly alone. On the 4th night, I called my mother. I didn't tell her the truth, couldn't tell her the truth. She'd think I was having a breakdown, would insist I come home, would treat me like a child who couldn't handle living alone. Instead, I asked about the apartment building, about its history. "Why do you want to know?" she asked. "Just curious. It's so old. I was wondering if anything interesting ever happened here." She was quiet for a moment. I heard her typing, searching, doing whatever mothers do when their children ask strange questions. "There was something," she said finally. "Years ago, before you moved in, a man died in that building. 4th floor, I think." My floor. My stomach tightened. How did he die? It doesn't say exactly, just that it was unexpected. The police investigated, but they never found anything. No foul play, no suicide, just... She paused. "It says he was found in the hallway, outside one of the apartments, like he'd been standing there when it happened." "Standing there doing what?" "I don't know, honey. These old news articles don't have much detail." Another pause. "Why are you asking about this? Is everything okay?" I told her I was fine, just curious. Hung up before she could ask more questions. A man had died on my floor, died standing in the hallway outside someone's apartment. The same hallway where a shadow stood for an hour every night, patient and still, waiting for something I couldn't understand. I needed to know more, needed to know who he was, which apartment he'd died outside, what had happened in the moments before his heart stopped. But when I tried to search for more information, I found something that made my blood run cold. The article my mother had found, I located the same one, read it through twice to make sure I understood. The man had been found on February 15th, 2019, 5 years ago. He'd been found outside apartment 4C, my apartment. and according to the article, he'd been dead for approximately 1 hour before anyone discovered him. His name was Peter Valdez. I found his obituary in the archives, a short, impersonal summary of a life I knew nothing about. 53 years old, never married, worked as a night security guard at a warehouse on the other side of the city. No family listed, no survivors, no mention of how he'd ended up outside my apartment at 1 a.m. on a cold February night. The obituary didn't explain why he'd been there, didn't explain what he'd wanted, what he'd been doing, why he'd died standing in my hallway, like he was waiting for someone to open the door. I dug deeper, found the police report through a public records request that took 2 weeks to process. The file was thin, no signs of forced entry, no evidence of foul play, no indication that Peter Valdez had done anything except walk up to apartment 4C, stop outside the door, and die. Cause of death: cardiac arrest. Natural causes, technically. A 53-year-old man with an undiagnosed heart condition dead before he hit the ground. But that wasn't what caught my attention. The report included a witness statement from the tenant of 4C at the time, a woman named Rosalind Murray. She'd been the one to find him, stepping out of her apartment at 2:30 a.m. to investigate a noise she'd heard. "I thought someone was knocking," she told the police. "A soft sound, like knuckles on wood. It went on for almost an hour. I was too scared to open the door. By the time I finally looked, he was just lying there. An hour." She'd heard knocking for an hour while a man died on the other side of her door. I called the building management office the next morning, asked if they had contact information for Rosalind Murray, said I was trying to reach former tenants for a neighborhood project. The woman on the phone was skeptical but eventually gave me an email address. I wrote to Rosalind that night, kept it vague, said I was the current tenant of 4C, said I'd heard about the incident that happened there, said I had some questions if she was willing to talk. She responded within an hour. I was wondering when someone would reach out. The shadow still there? My hands went cold on the keyboard. I typed back, "How did you know about the shadow?" "Because I saw it too. Every night for 3 months before I moved out, standing outside my bedroom door, staying for exactly 1 hour, getting closer each time." I called her. She answered on the second ring, a voice that sounded tired, worn down, like someone who hadn't slept well in years. "I moved out 2 weeks after Peter died," she said. "I couldn't take it anymore. The shadow, the knocking, the feeling of being watched. I thought moving would make it stop. Did it?" Silence on the line. Then, for a while, a few months, but it found me again. Different apartment, different city. It always finds me. What is it? What does it want? I don't know what it is. Some kind of echo, maybe. Something that got stuck in that apartment and latched onto me. Her voice dropped. But I know what it wants. It wants to get closer. Every night, it gets a little closer. First it's in the hallway. Then it's at the door. Then it's inside the room. Then what? Then it's standing over your bed, looking down at you. And you can't move, can't breathe, can't do anything except lie there while it watches. I thought about the shadow I'd seen, how it had stretched further into my room the second night, how the light in the hallway had been turned off. "Peter Valdez," I said. "Was he trying to warn you? Is that why he came to the apartment?" Peter worked security at the warehouse where I used to store my things. I'd talked to him a few times, mentioned the shadow, asked if he believed in ghosts. He said he'd look into it. Her breath hitched. 2 days later, he showed up at my door in the middle of the night. I heard him knocking, heard him saying my name, but I was too scared to open the door. I thought it was a trick. I thought the shadow was trying to lure me out. It wasn't. No, it was Peter. He'd found something. I don't know what. He wanted to tell me, wanted to help. And I let him die on my doorstep because I was too afraid to open the door. I sat in my dark apartment, phone pressed to my ear, rain tapping against the windows. The hallway stretched behind me, empty for now, but I knew it wouldn't stay that way. "What did he find?" I asked. "What was he trying to tell you?" "I never found out. After he died, I went to the warehouse, tried to access his locker, but everything was gone, cleaned out, like someone had gotten there first. Who? I don't know, but there was a notebook he used to carry, leather-bound, old, always tucked in his jacket pocket. He was writing in it the last time I saw him, taking notes on something. If you want answers, you need to find that notebook." "Where would it be?" "The police never found it on his body. It wasn't in his apartment. It wasn't at the warehouse." She paused. "But he died outside your door. Maybe he dropped it. Maybe it's still there, somewhere in that building, waiting to be found." After I hung up, I sat in the dark for a long time, thinking about Peter Valdez, a man who'd tried to help a stranger and died for it. A man whose shadow might still be standing in my hallway, still trying to deliver a message he never got to speak. I checked the time, 11:47 p.m. In less than 2 hours, the shadow would return, and this time, I wasn't going to hide under my covers and wait for it to leave. This time, I was going to open the door. I waited in the dark. All the lights were off now, my choice this time. If the shadow needed darkness to exist, if it could only appear when the contrast between light and dark was sharp enough to cast it, then I wanted to see what happened when the rules changed. I sat on the edge of my bed, facing the door, watching the crack at the bottom where the hallway light usually seeped through. Tonight, there was no light, just darkness on both sides of the door, unbroken and complete. At 1:14 a.m., the temperature dropped. I felt it before I saw anything. A cold that crept under my skin, settled into my bones, made my breath fog in front of my face. The radiator had been running all night, the apartment warm enough to make me sweat. But now it was freezing, so cold my fingers ached, so cold I could feel frost forming on my eyelashes. Then I heard it, knocking, soft and rhythmic, exactly as Rosalind had described. Knuckles on wood, patient and persistent, coming from the other side of my bedroom door. I stood up. My legs didn't want to cooperate. They shook beneath me, threatening to buckle, but I forced them to move. One step toward the door, then another. The knocking continued, steady as a heartbeat, never speeding up, never slowing down. I reached the door, put my hand on the knob. The metal was so cold it burned. The knocking stopped. Silence, complete and absolute, so thick I could feel it pressing against my eardrums. I stood there with my hand on the frozen doorknob, waiting, listening. Then, from the other side of the door, a voice. "Please." It was barely a whisper, hoarse, strained, like someone who'd been trying to speak for years and had finally found the strength. A man's voice, Peter's voice. "Please, open the door. I need to show you." My hand tightened on the knob. Every instinct screamed at me to let go, to back away, to hide under my covers and wait for morning. But I thought about Rosalind, too afraid to open the door while a man died on her doorstep. I thought about Peter, collapsing in the hallway with knowledge he'd never get to share. I opened the door. The hallway was empty. No shadow, no figure, no one standing there waiting for me. Just darkness and cold and the faint smell of something old, something like dust and decay and the particular staleness of air that hadn't moved in years. But on the floor, right where the footprints had been, something glinted in the faint light from my bedroom. A key, old, tarnished, the kind that might fit a storage locker or a safety deposit box. I bent down and picked it up. The metal was warm, warmer than it should have been, warmer than anything in this frozen hallway, and attached to it on a small metal ring was a tag with an address written in faded ink. I recognized the address. It was the warehouse where Peter had worked. The cold began to recede. The temperature climbed back toward normal, degree by degree. And as the warmth returned, I felt something shift in the apartment. A release, a loosening, like a held breath finally being let go. I thought it was over. I thought Peter had given me what he wanted me to find, and now he could rest. I was wrong. I went to the warehouse the next morning. It was abandoned now, had been closed for years, according to the chain-link fence and the condemned signs plastered across the doors. But I found a way in through a side entrance, followed the numbered units until I reached the one that matched the key. Inside was a single box, old, cardboard, sealed with tape that had yellowed with age. I opened it with shaking hands. Peter's notebook was on top, leather-bound, worn at the edges, exactly as Rosalind had described. I opened it and started to read. He'd been researching the building, my building, tracing its history back decades through ownership changes and renovations and the small disasters that accumulate in any structure that old. He'd found records, interviewed former tenants, compiled a timeline of incidents that stretched back almost 60 years. The shadow had always been there. Every tenant of 4C going back to 1967 had reported the same thing, a figure outside their door, knocking that lasted exactly 1 hour, the feeling of being watched, being studied, being measured for something they couldn't understand. Some had moved out, some had stayed, and some, Peter had circled their names, underlined them twice, had disappeared entirely. No forwarding address, no records, no trace, like they'd simply ceased to exist. The last page of the notebook was different from the others, hastier, the handwriting sloppier, like Peter had been writing in a hurry. I know what it is now. It's not a ghost. It's not a haunting. It's a door. The shadow isn't standing outside the apartment. It's standing outside our world, trying to get in. Every night it gets closer. Every night the door opens a little wider, and when it finally opens all the way, the entry stopped mid-sentence. The rest of the page was blank. Peter had died before he could finish, died trying to warn Rosalind, trying to tell her what he'd learned. And now I knew too. The shadow wasn't Peter Valdez. It had never been Peter Valdez. It was something else, something that had been working on that door for 60 years, pushing it open inch by inch, waiting for the night it could finally step through. I looked at the notebook in my hands, looked at the names of all the tenants who'd disappeared. Then I looked at the bottom of the box and felt my heart stop. A photograph, old, black and white, curled at the edges. It showed a doorway, my doorway, unmistakably, with the same molding, the same proportions, the same crack in the wall I saw every day. And standing in the doorway, barely visible in the shadows, was a figure. Tall, broad-shouldered, head tilted slightly to one side, looking directly at the camera, looking directly at me. I moved out that night, packed everything I could carry, left everything else, drove to a motel 3 towns away and paid cash for a room. I didn't sleep, just sat on the bed with the lights on, watching the door, waiting for a shadow that never came. By morning, I'd almost convinced myself I was safe, that whatever was in apartment 4C was tied to that space, bound to that doorway, unable to follow me into my new life. 3 days later, I found a new apartment. Different city, different building. A modern complex with good lighting and no history older than the last decade. I signed a lease, moved in, started the process of rebuilding a normal life. The first week was quiet. The second week was quiet. I started to sleep again, started to relax, started to believe that running had been the right choice. Then I came home on the 15th day and found footprints in my carpet. 2 of them, right outside my bedroom door, pressed deep into the fibers, facing the threshold. The same footprints that had appeared in my old apartment. The same footprints that meant something had been standing there, waiting while I was away. I checked every room, every closet, every corner, every space large enough to hide. Nothing. The apartment was empty, exactly as I'd left it. But that night, at 1:14 a.m., I saw the shadow. It fell across the crack under my bedroom door, dark and solid and unmistakable. The same silhouette I'd seen in 4C. The same broad shoulders, the same tilted head, the same absolute stillness. Peter's notebook had been wrong about one thing. The shadow wasn't tied to the apartment. It wasn't tied to the building. It was tied to me. I'd opened the door. I'd looked at the photograph. I'd made myself part of whatever was trying to push through, and now it was following me, attached to me, using me as an anchor point, a fixed location in our world that it could reach through. Every night now, the shadow comes. Every night, it stands outside my door for exactly 1 hour, patient and still. And every night, it gets a little closer. Last week, it was in the hallway. 3 nights ago, it was at my bedroom door. Last night, it was inside my room, standing at the foot of my bed, close enough that I could feel the cold radiating off of it like an open freezer. Tonight, I don't know where it will be. I don't know how much closer it can get before the door finally opens all the way. But I know it's coming. I can feel it, a pressure building behind my eyes, a weight settling into my chest, the growing certainty that something is very close to breaking through. Peter's notebook is on my nightstand. I've read it so many times I've memorized every word. The tenants who disappeared. The door that opens a little wider every night. The figure in the photograph, watching from the shadows, waiting for its chance. I used to wonder what happened to the ones who vanished. Used to imagine them running, hiding, finding some way to escape the thing that followed them. I don't wonder anymore. I know what happened to them. They didn't escape. They couldn't escape. The door opened and they were pulled through. And wherever they are now, it's somewhere our world has no name for. I'm writing this because I don't know how many nights I have left. The shadow is patient, but it's also persistent. Every night it gets closer. Every night the cold gets deeper. And soon, maybe tonight, maybe tomorrow, maybe a week from now, it's going to be close enough to touch. I don't know what happens then. I just know I won't be here to find out. If you're reading this, if you've ever seen a shadow that shouldn't exist or heard knocking that lasted exactly 1 hour, I need you to understand something. Don't open the door. Whatever it promises, whatever it shows you, whatever voice it uses to beg for entry, don't open the door. Because once you do, you become part of it. You become the next anchor, the next doorway, the next crack in the wall between our world and wherever that thing comes from. The shadow is outside my door right now. I can see it through the crack, stretching across the floor, reaching toward my bed. It's been there for 47 minutes, 13 more to go. I wonder how close it will be when the hour ends. I wonder if tonight is the night the door finally opens. I wonder if anyone will remember I existed at all. The cold is getting deeper now. I can see my breath fogging in the dark. And somewhere, just on the other side of the wall, something is waiting. I don't think I'll be writing again. The door is almost open, and there's no one left to close it.